So hi, everyone. So this is a workshop, so I'm just calling it to order. And as you know, in a workshop, the council is doing its work to get ready for a formal meeting. This is not a meeting where there are public comments, and we're just working our way through stuff. In terms of roll call, I see Molly, Jeff, Amber, Pam, George, and Lee are here. Paloma is excused. I see the city attorney off in the distance, and I see the city administrator at the table and the finance director at the table. Okay, so much of this meeting is about going through the budget and taking questions from the council. So I think the first one is proposed amendments?
To the 2025 budget.
To this budget, right? The current one, not
The
next year's.
2025 budget.
Okay, so let's go through those. You're going to do them, Susan?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me open that up. The first amendment we have is for police and detective overtime. We are proposing to move $205,000 into the patrol overtime line and $35,000 into the detective overtime line. This would be transferred in from the police regular salary lines. This is a result of starting the year with short 8 officers. I think that's historic, actually, for the city. We have never been that low, so that obviously created overtime. We were looking to mitigate some of this during the year, and we have filled some of these positions, but we still need to fund some overtime. This amendment should take us through the end of the year. We projected through the end of the year how much we would need, and we have those amounts available in the regular salary line since we weren't able to hire all the officers we needed.
And we should end with the sum of overtime and regular salaries being the same as the original budget. Again, more overtime and less salaries, but the sum of the two will be the same.
Okay, so is the net
The
impact
net.
is 0?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
We
it's
expect-
from one expense line to another.
And projecting out, that should hold for the rest of the year.
Okay.
The second line is actually for the finance department overtime line, increasing at $10,000 and using contingency funds for that. We've had several projects that the finance staff has been overseeing. The major one is the water meter upgrade project, which has taken a significant amount of staff's time. Also updating the procurement process that we have.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Any questions on those? All right, that seems easy. All set?
Yeah.
All right. So now we're switching to the 2026 budget, so next year's budget, and we're going to do police first. And so, Chief, you want to come up?
And Mayor, just a reminder, so this week, we're going to do police, fire, and recreation. At the next workshop, we'll have your highway department, water, and sewer.
Okay.
And Ben, if you could put up the PowerPoint, please. And Tom, he'll advance as you want to.
Sounds good. Turn my mic off, my back on. All right.
And you have in your packet the slides from tonight and also excerpts of the parts of the budget that are for police, which are police and detective.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that because I can never see what's on the, what's being presented, so thank you for that.
It's a little small. I might regret not bringing my glasses. So this is the police department's operating budget proposed for 2026. And we can go to the first slide. That's the department responsibilities. You guys are pretty familiar. We operate 24/7, providing protection to the community, ensuring public safety and a peaceful quality of life for everybody who lives and visits the city. In the last year, we handled nearly 7,000 police calls. Those include traffic accidents, domestic incidents, crimes in progress, proactive items like traffic enforcement. And like I said, so we proactively patrol the city, and we maintain a constant community engagement through Main Street patrols, through interacting with the community at various events, and staffing those. Go to the next slide.
Next, ma'am.
As far as staffing goes, we're budgeted for 36 sworn members. We're going to maintain that budgeting this year. Right now, we have 3 vacancies. That total of 36 includes the chief, the lieutenants, sergeants, patrolmen, and detectives. We also have 6 non-sworn members. Those are our dispatchers, our 2 administrative professionals, and then we're augmented by some actual non-employees, such as our behavioral health specialist and our domestic violence advocate. We can go to the next slide. So for projects and initiatives for 2025, as you guys probably remember, our primary goals were basically expanding the personnel of the department. So we reordered our background checks to speed up the hiring process. We put items that eliminate most candidates at the front of that process, and it's been pretty successful. We've been able to get through hiring a lot quicker. We've hired 5 officers in 2025. 2 of them are currently still in FTO. 2 were NYPD transfers, and they're now out on the street. And then we have 2 who are in various phases of academies.
And FTO is field training, so they do is it a 3-month training after they get back from academy?
So if they have prior experience, they do usually about a 2-month in-service, and then if they're coming out of the academy, it's 3 to 4 months, depending on their progress.
Cool.
So, and then currently, actually, we're beginning the background process on another NYPD candidate, so we're keeping our fingers crossed on that. We do, however, have 2 officers still out on injury, which is creating some gaps. Another goal that we had this year was to kind of increase our parking and traffic enforcement. It's the source of most of the dissatisfaction that we actually hear from the public. I'll actually take this moment to address some rumors. They spread that we don't enforce parking enforcement at all. There's even mistruths going around that we were told not to do parking enforcement. To the contrary, actually this year we're up 93% in parking summonses issued. So that's 1,754 parking tickets were issued this year to date. We've also made traffic enforcement a larger part of our daily patrols and assignments this year, and we're up 39% of stops year to date as well. So that's 904. You can go to the next slide. In 2026, for our projects and initiatives, like last year, our primary focus is again on staffing stabilization and development. We're again deferring major spending in other areas in order to fund contractual pay increases so that we can recruit and retain officers as we've been. In fact, if you remove contractual obligations from this budget proposal, we're tending to about like a 1% difference from last year. So we can go to the next slide. So the major items that we propose to change, obviously you guys are all well aware of the salary increases in the contract that was just passed. So that's actually the largest change by far. The second largest is overtime, which we're looking at a 4.6% increase. So that's about proportional to the salary increases. Though staffing's improved at this time, we're still too short 2 positions. We have 2 out on long-term injury. 2 of the officers we hired this year are in training and won't be counting on the shift until next year. In the detective division, we also had to keep up with the balancing of caseloads, increased demands on discovery. But that's the process of turning all of our information over to the prosecutor so they can turn it to the public defender, and keeping our background checks moving. So they've had kind of a higher burden placed on them this year. And finally, we're hoping that, it doesn't come fully to fruition, but next year we'll have 5 officers who are able to retire. Our 2 larger increases.
And then, Tom, just before you leave it, some of the increases from detective and other were because of the reaccreditation that we just went through, and Tom successfully navigated that 5-year reaccreditation.
and there'll be a nice picture coming up.
And these two items are 220 grand of your increase, and it's basically your entire increase.
Yeah, like I said, everything else accounts for about a 1% difference.
Yeah.
If you go to the next slide, our kind of next two largest items pretty much pale in comparison. The next largest is actually traffic lights. We're responsible for the maintenance and repair of the 9 traffic signals that are owned by the city. Last year, we had a contract with a new vendor. The price went up for maintenance. This year, it's going to stay the same, but we have found that we've actually just had to make more repairs than we anticipated, so we're looking at kind of doubling that, that line item to cover that. The next one is our youth program. Last year, our 2 volunteers had pretty much retired from the program. They did a lot of the fundraising, but they wrapped up their service. This year, it was entirely run by department personnel, all of whom were running it for the first time. So we had a smaller than usual group, which kind of ended up being fortunate since we were fully funding it through our budget. Next year, we have indications that we'll have the full complement of participants again, and without monetary donations, we just kind of have to cover the whole expense of it, and that means buses for the trips and things like that. So we're looking to increase that one as well. As far as decreases, we can go to the next slide. We actually decreased our equipment line again. As I mentioned, the focus of last year's operating budget was personnel, and it is again this year. So last year, we reduced this line by 54% by only replacing items that were already in use, which was mostly gas masks. And this year, we're doing it again, with the bulk of that spending being for 2 handheld radar units. Less lethal was also able to be reduced because our electronic control weapons are included, bundled in the contract with Axon for our body-worn cameras that you guys are aware of. And so that is also able to decrease. So again, in conclusion, we can go to the final slide. The primary focus of the budget is staff development and maintenance, and so we are, like I said, other spending is pretty minimal. Thank you for your continued support. You guys have any questions?
I think just a clarification, I do remember the Axon contract. So our body worn policy has not changed. We still have the same procedures and practices, but the cost is just folded into that contract price now, so we don't need a separate line item. Is that accurate?
That's correct. I mean, we still have the separate line item. It's just reduced significantly because we still buy things like cartridges, training materials and stuff like that. But yes, it's folded into the Axon contract, so it's one contract,
Okay.
one fee,
Thank you.
because it's the same vendor providing both.
So I just have one comment, having been on a bike ride with Officer Lawrence. You know, I thought, oh, cool, we're just going to ride around town. And you try to figure out what does he do during that time? It's like he's checking registrations and parking, right? And so I can assure you the parking tickets are getting done.
Yeah, there's actually a parking ticket writer in his hand in the photo that we have up. So.
Yeah. All right. And I was like, oh, that's what he does with all his spare time. Because you can't just ride around the
Right.
entire time. You got to do something. And so he goes to the parking lots and checks registration and inspection certificates. And it's like, it makes sense. Thank you.
Is that a part of the explanation for the increase of 93% in parking enforcement? Is that you got the bike cop that's now checking things, or why is there that?
That helps as well, but also last year we had a vendor that was working for us for years. They got bought by another company. They were a company that kind of specialized in municipal enforcement, and the company that bought them specialized in parking lot management. And oftentimes when you see one corporation purchase another, they destroy that one. And that's pretty much what ended up happening. The support kind of went downhill, and they were also giving us equipment to issue the tickets, which was designed more for like being indoors in a more controlled environment. And so they weren't working. So the parking ticket writers, a cop would go out there and write a parking ticket and try to print it out, and they'd be trying to print it like 100 times and it wouldn't work. So now we also have better equipment, and it's really streamlined and made the process better.
So there's an increase because there was a decrease last year. It's kind of returned to normal, or kind of a combination of things.
it's
There
probably-
was pretty low last year.
It was pretty
relative-
low last year, but it was probably high, it was probably still higher this year than the year before. Like I said, we're kind of just emphasizing that. Even traffic stops, there was no particular decrease last year, but we're trying to put more of an emphasis on it, because the public clearly wants that.
Yeah, is there any trend you expect for 2026 in terms of parking and traffic enforcement?
I mean, this year, we're increased by a pretty significant amount, so I don't want to kind of go overboard. So I think right now, we're kind of leaning towards, maintaining the trend that we're on for next year.
You made mention of major spending being deferred. Did you have anything in particular in mind when you wrote that in the PowerPoint?
Only that we're reducing line items like the equipment line item from what we had spent in previous years.
Is that when you say deferred, is it that you're expecting in future years that you might have to return to that?
It's possible. There's different things need to be replaced at different times. There's probably going to be a pretty significant radio project coming up at some point, which we're hoping is funded primarily for grants, but our radios are getting older, but right now is not the time to replace them. So going into the future, you kind of never know what equipment's going to fail and what's going to need to be replaced.
And if equipment did come up, we would find, if he needed equipment, we'll get it to him. We're also working with our DPW to do some improvements on Tom's facilities. As you know, we redid in-house the locker room, the men's locker room. We'll be doing the female locker room and also the dispatch office, which is, used 24 hours a day, and it hasn't been updated in 30 years. So we're going to make a play to try to have our in-house staff redo that, and we may buy some additional equipment and come back to you with some minor stuff.
Is that capital plan? I'm not seeing,
Yeah, that's all in the capital
Yeah.
plan.
But we did it, we've been doing it in-house for less than it would have been to bid out.
yeah, I remember talking about that and hearing about how much money they saved and all the great ideas they had, so,
And
Quality's
Looking
very
forward
good.
the quality of the work was superb.
yes, looking forward to seeing what the women's locker room comes out to be.
And then just for council, the salary increase you're seeing this year, you're going to see it next year and the next year, right? So,
Chief, there's just two items that I'd ask for some explanation as to what they are. One is the secondary language, and the other is police assistant.
So secondary language is, there's a stipend for anybody who speaks a secondary language in the contract. It's $1,000. It did go up because we hired another Spanish-speaking officer. And what was the other one?
Police assistant.
Police assistant, that's a salary line,
Dispatcher.
correct? That's our dispatchers, yeah.
Okay.
That's their official title.
That, under civil service, that's what we call them.
Actually, if Sarah was here, she'd tell you it just changed actually to dispatcher now.
Yeah, they did.
Now dispatchers are called dispatchers.
I want to get to a line item on the budget in a second, but just curious about the investment that's happening with traffic stops and the repair that needs to be done to the traffic lights. Just curious about, because I've seen the deployment now this year, I think, and forgive me if I didn't notice it previously, but there's the signs that show you your speed at a
Yeah.
couple different locations, strategically located. And so curious about the impact of that, if that's, what the strategy is around that deployment, and coupled with if there's improvements in technology, as there just seems to be these days everywhere we turn. If there's an like, 'cause I know traffic cameras, like, automatic tickets with running red lights and such, is there constant exploration about the deployment of new technologies to try to improve traffic safety around here? Or?
As far as the signs go, they kind of tend to go where we are getting traffic complaints. So we have some that are permanently mounted and a couple that are mobile. And so the lieutenant who handles that usually kind of tailors those to, where the current need is. As far as things like red light cameras and speed cameras, that's a discussion that would have to be had on kind of a large scale, because when you do that, you kind of have to revamp your laws. You have to because what ends up happening is you're not writing people under the vehicle and traffic law. You're writing people under like a city code. So that's like the bus stop tickets that people get. Those aren't vehicle and traffic law tickets. Those are county code tickets that are being sent. So you'd have to have kind of large scale consultation of how you're going to implement that, if there is interest in that.
And I just wanted to confirm that we are keeping the current non-city employees, our behavioral health specialists and the part-time victims advocate, no change to those services, right?
That's correct.
I saw that school event security went down again. It'd been down for our 2024 budget and then was up last year. Is that just based on any trends and conversations with the school district?
Yeah, it's based on the requests that they make. So they'll request, especially like at certain games, not to get into too much detail, but there was some level of concern in another event, which we wouldn't have normally staffed, that they asked us to staff last year. So it kind of goes based on how many times they ask. The school reimburses us 100% for it. So we've lowered it, but if it has to go up, if they have more requests next year, it's not an emergency because it's 100% reimbursed.
Great, thank you.
And again, if this goes up, there's a revenue that comes with it, so that you don't see behind this.
Just 2 items on the budget, where I'm noticing that the activity to year-to-date is lower than the budget that's been revised. I'm curious if there's going to be a flurry of activity around training and the youth program, whether there's a request for increase. Is there going to be still, a use of the youth training program budget in the remainder of year and training?
So the youth program budget we've used.
It looks like, if I'm not mistaken, says the year-to-date is like 2188 versus the 7,000.
Well, you might not have paid all the bills yet.
That's true, yeah. We probably have some POs outstanding. So
Purch-
sometimes it
purchase
takes people a
orders.
little while to get us the paperwork, but we definitely did use it. The training budget, so the training budget, it doesn't pay like the salaries of the officers. It pays for things like the actual tuitions for the schools, transportation, the meals for the officers when we send them. And then one reason why we have it on the high side is because of our being short-staffed. There's a possibility that we could end up having to pay for an academy. And an academy usually costs like $9,000 to $11,000. We've been fortunate because we've built good relationships with the academies they've used by sending instructors, that we've managed to have a relationship to where the academies that we've sent people to, they haven't charged us for, pretty much in exchange for the fact that we help keep it running by sending instructors. So while we probably won't hit our total this year for the training budget because of that, again, because we could potentially hire 7 more officers, we kind of need to have that available in case we do have to pay for something like that.
Is there any expectation that academy relationship could change in 2026, that you could have to pay for any new person we might hire?
It depends on the availability of the academies. We, with the Dutchess County Academy and with the Rockland Academy that we've been using, it's worked out well timing-wise, and so we do have that relationship, and I wouldn't anticipate it changing with those 2. But if for some reason those were not available and we had to send an officer to an academy that we haven't had, this interaction with, then we may have to pay that.
How many, you said that you expect the youth academy to be kind of full capacity next summer. Kind of roughly how many young people are part of that academy if it's going to be full?
We cap it at about 20.
20?
Yeah.
And those are high school students?
Correct.
Anything else for the chief? We got another chief after this one.
He's also bald and named Tom.
All good? All right, thank you so much, chief.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank
Nice
you.
job.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And if you want copies of any of those pictures, shoot me an email.
Tom, come on up.
So next up is Chief Tom Lucchese of our fire department. And thank you, Chief Figlia.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hey, welcome. And Ben is putting up your presentation.
We're good.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for having me tonight. So as we start with the 2026 proposed budget, as in past years, my main goal was try and deliver a very balanced, data-driven, and fiscally responsible budget. I really looked at the last 3 years at what my projections were and what my actual expenses were and try and give you real numbers. Okay, Deb. Next one.
Next one, Ben.
So to review our staffing, we're a combination department which means I have career employees as well as volunteers. I have 17 career staff under me, which includes 4 lieutenants and myself. I also have 4 volunteer firefighters, which includes a volunteer assistant chief. The 3 other volunteer firefighters is comprised of a fire police volunteer, so he basically directs traffic at a fire scene. A member who's trained to exterior duties, so he helps outside of a fire building. And a brand new volunteer who joined us in August, who's still working on his training. As the budget sits in front of you, it does not have any staffing increases, though I am going to discuss in the next slide why I feel we have to increase our staffing. Okay, Ben? In April of this year, the city experienced a devastating fire which took the life of one of our residents. This slide here is a bunch of snapshots from that fire. You'll see when you're looking at the pictures, there's yellow arrows. In the first few minutes of that fire scene, my 4 career on-duty firefighters deployed 2 hose lines and a deck gun. A deck gun is like a large water cannon on the roof of a fire apparatus. You'll see if those yellow arrows indicate neighbors or bystanders who assisted my 4 on-duty career members in the initial attempts to put that fire out. In the bottom left-hand picture, you'll actually see one of the neighbors. Once again, these people are not City Beacon firefighters, on top of one of my fire apparatus using the deck gun. You'll see in the other pictures, the arrows highlight these neighbors or bystanders pulling fire hoses to try and help my on-duty career staff. Though I very much greatly appreciate all the help they gave us, quite frankly, it is a liability, and we should not have to rely on untrained civilians to assist us at fire scenes. On the right-hand side, you'll see what the national standard calls for career firefighters or career fire departments to have 17 firefighters on the scene of a single-family dwelling fire in the first 9 minutes. We brought 4. Okay, Ben? So talk about volunteer staffing. As you guys know, City Beacon traditionally had a very rich history in volunteerism. At one time, there's 3 very active volunteer fire companies comprised of 75 active firefighters in each company. That equates to 225 active volunteers. Today, we sit at 4 active volunteers. What we've seen in Beacon is no different than what we've seen throughout the country, county, state, and country. In 2025, I lost 1 volunteer member and took in 1. After a brief pause of taking volunteers for the firehouse project, I started trying to recruit volunteers this year. Due to the large investment, when we take a new member in, I want to make sure I take in the right member. So I always sit down with our prospective applicant, and quite frankly, I'm very straightforward with the dedication and time commitment. The initial class about 30 years ago was about 39 hours of training, and then you were all set to go. Today, that sits at 120 for the very basic fire class. With all the meetings I've had with prospective applicants, I've had 1 application come in, and that's that new member who started in August. Okay, Ben?
And those are state standards, they're not our standards, but we have to abide by them.
So talking about some key changes in the proposed budget. First, I want to talk about the regular salaries and overtime increase. We signed this year with the professional firefighters at MOA to negotiate their CBA, in which they received a salary increase. And that's going to start in 2026. So if their base salary is increasing, it also drove up their base overtime. In addition, we have maintenance of equipment increase. The primary driver for this is the new firehouse facility we have. We have a bunch of new systems in the new building that we've never had before, such as the fire alarm system, sprinkler system, and vehicle exhaust system. The repair of equipment is exactly what it sounds like. It's to fix stuff when it's broken. In this line here, I made it reflective of what we've seen the last 2 or 3 years. I've run out of money as early as March or April trying to keep our equipment in service. So taking a look at our past budgets, I made the proposed 2026 reflective of that. Okay, Ben? Strategic investments were made or proposed to hopefully save the city money in the long run. The first is the increased salaries in the MOA that was recently signed. Quite frankly, our members' volunteer career are our greatest resources. So this proposed budget reflects that with the salary increase. That will hopefully stop the turnover of us hiring career staff to train them and invest a lot of time and effort only for them to leave for higher paying jobs. Next, I'll talk about this in a few slides, is a new health and wellness program that we're implementing.
Back, Ben, please. Back one, Ben.
This new health and wellness program hopefully will save costs in the long run on medical costs and insurance, as well as covering injury and accident leave. Also, something that you guys approved earlier in the year is the purchase of a new ladder truck. I hope when we take delivery of that, the repair of equipment costs goes down. Okay, Ben?
There we go.
So like all department heads in the city, I try very hard to be a really good steward of the taxpayer's dollar. And by no means I cut corners, but I certainly try to save the city money. This is one example that you see on your screen here, is the EV nozzle project. The EV nozzle was built or designed to help fight electric vehicle fires or lithium-ion vehicle-based fires. I could go out and buy a commercially made nozzle for $6,000 to $8,000. What I recently did was sketch something basically out on a napkin, gave it to our mechanics at DPW, and they built this awesome nozzle that you could see the video playing for just under $300. That's an example of a cost savings that I try to do on any project I work on.
So this goes under the car, right? To
Yes, so quite frankly, the fire service as a whole does not have a good handle on fighting an EV or electric vehicle fire. So in the city here, we're building a strategy of using a blanket to smother the fire. This nozzle will go underneath to try and cool the battery to prevent it from spreading. And that's really for our buildings that we're seeing in the city built with underground vehicle parking. A EV fire that happens, say, in a parking lot out front, if there's no hazards, we're going to let it burn. To try and fight that EV fire would cost about 30,000 gallons worth of water in 8 to 10 hours of time. But we don't have that luxury when we look at our parking garages. So that's what that nozzle was built for. Ben, you could move up. Since April 2023, I've secured just under $100,000 in grants. I go after every grant possible. I really view that every dollar I save in a grant is a dollar saved for the taxpayers. I just put in for a grant as recently as last week. Okay, Ben? So talking about our 2025 accomplishments, we've had a very, very busy and proactive year. Over the last few years, we have identified some opportunities where we could improve our services for our residents and visitors. One of them being our water rescue capabilities. If you recall last year around this time, there was a kayaker in distress a couple hundred yards off the shore off Long Dock. We unfortunately watched him doggy paddle for just about 27 minutes until a neighboring fireboat came to retrieve him. We were able to outfit our inflatable rescue boat. We brought in an outside instructor for training, and we now have close to shore water rescue capabilities on the Hudson River. We went out as recently as 2 weeks ago for a rescue. We also identified a weakness that we had with accessing some of our remote areas in our parks and nearby Mount Beacon. We were able to acquire a used UTV. We brought in outside training again, and we now have that capability on the mountain. And we went out last week for a rescue. One of the biggest accomplishments that I'm most proud of is continuing to transform our department into an agency that, quite frankly, other departments are now talking about. I'm doing that by changing the culture, really investing in the department, improving training and professional development. Okay, Ben?
The rescue boat has a motor now.
Yes, the rescue boat does have a motor,
Cool.
much more effective than ours.
And just to build on Tom's last point about the department being somewhere where that people want to come, we lost a firefighter last year to Arlington, and we were about to lose a second one. And it was after we did the contract and with all of the changes that Tom is implementing that that second person decided not to go. And that's not only good for morale and the team building that happens over there, but it saves us on having to outfit and train another new person.
Sure.
Looking at our initiatives and goals for 2026, I'm really excited for what lies ahead. The first thing, which I've been working on for a few years, is training our firefighters to serve as part of a rescue task force. What a rescue task force is training our firefighters to enter a warm zone of, say, a hostile or mass casualty incident, where they can provide rapid treatment and extrication of the victims, which will drastically improve survival rates. Our closest rescue task force is about 30 minutes away, which quite frankly could be too late. My pet project, which I started this year, is a very comprehensive health and wellness program. This health and wellness program would be required under a proposed emergency response standard change to the OSHA law. This is a very large investment into our firefighters, which includes several different initiatives. The first being annual medical screening. So since 2023, every year for our required annual medical screening, we've been increasing the requirements of it to try to meet national standards. Over the last 2 years, our annual medical screening has caught some medical concerns for our members that may not have been caught. So it was able to catch small problems before they became big problems. We're also tapping into some experts for physical fitness and mobility training and mental and behavioral health, as well as contracting with a nutritionist for our members. We are the first department in the area that is not only doing this, but we're not just going to have a policy on paper, we're actually going to follow through with it. It's something that I think we're going to see some long-term results for what's going to be a small investment. So finally, we'd like to try and increase our staffing in 2026. And I think we could do that through financially responsible ways.
And again, we've talked in the past that Tom had put in a grant through the
SAFER
SAFER
grant, right?
program, which would have helped to support the hiring of 3. It doesn't look like they have awarded a lot of them. Arlington did get one, and it now appears that they're closed. So we didn't get it. And what we thought is if you want to look at it, we could use, Tom and I have talked about going up incrementally.
Yeah.
At least getting one more in the door so that we have some flexibility on the staff, on the shifts. Again, we had hoped by this time we had some news on the grant, but it doesn't look like.
So did they decline it or just close the grant window?
So this year, as opposed to past years they normally award through 8 separate weeks. They hand out the awards. This year, it was September 29th when the fiscal year ended September 30th.
Okay. And so we don't have any feedback on why the application didn't yield results, I guess?
No,
Okay.
if the government shut down, I don't expect anytime soon
Okay.
to get any feedback.
And we'll continue to try that grant if it survives and if it's available to us next year. But again, it's something to think about as we have these budget conversations. Tom's made a very compelling case to me that this comes down to safety, it comes down to the effectiveness. Thankfully, we do have mutual aid, so we have Castle Point that comes, but it often takes 5 to 10 minutes before they show up. And that's not because they're not diligent, it's just, it takes some
That's
time
how
for
long it
them to
takes, yeah.
mobilize.
Okay.
And we've had great support from our other neighbors, like the Village of Fishkill. Who else does the mutual aid? Roundabout?
Roundabout and Glen Oak for standbys.
And we give that in kind as well. But we've gotten kind of too bare bones, and we're at that point in the transition from that robust volunteer force to all professional, and we've got to build, and I'm trying to build it sustainably, but I think we do need to continue to build.
Yeah, my 2 cents had been that if we got the SAFER grant, which covers only
65%,
of year one,
yes.
and then
65, 65, 35.
and then we're on our own,
Yep.
is that we gotten that, we'd figured out how to fund the rest. So now we may have to think about it differently, and we may have to do it incrementally, one at a time, or something, because it's a big nut to take on 3, right?
And it was hard to put it in this year because we did really invest in salaries so that we could keep people. I mean, we were well behind every other professional department, and now you're not. You're actually competitive. We'll never compete with Arlington, which has more money than anyone I know. But at least we can compete with some of the others.
Okay.
Chief, does the cost of the health and wellness program, is that reflected in the, where would that be reflected in? the,
That's under
budget?
training,
Training. Okay.
yes. So I'm using a hybrid program of contracting with outside resources as well as using online portals to try and be very fiscally responsible rolling out that program.
And this is a program that if it works for the fire department, we might look at it for other departments, including the police.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of annual screening requirement, I think, is kind of fairly normal in the private sector for
Yeah.
being able to take advantage of your employer's insurance.
Yeah.
So I think it's becoming pretty common.
I like the flexibility and the fitness will help us hopefully avoid
Yeah.
pulls and
Reduce injuries.
things that might be avoidable.
Yeah.
I noticed one of your key focus areas you put was community outreach. Can you share a little more about what you're thinking about with that?
Sure, so I do that right now. It's actually that time of year. Last week was Fire Prevention Week, so we visit every school and daycare in the city. I constantly have firehouse tours where I have outsiders come in all the time. We're always interacting with the public and plan to continue doing so.
And is the fire department part of some of our building inspections as well, like the fire apparatus or the kind of the stuff within buildings, or is that handled exclusively by the building department?
So we don't do code enforcement, the building department does, but we routinely interact and do assist them. Every Tuesdays, the city does building or fire inspections,
Okay.
and my on-duty chef does go with them, more for building familiarity. So they go in and out of all the buildings.
Chief, would you talk a little bit about the new construction and what you do with the shift on that?
Yeah, so part of one of our daily things is we do visit various locations in the city, and all of our new buildings under construction, we routinely visit. This way we can see what's, what they are before the wall coverings go up, and my members could become very familiar with it. So we have a really close relationship with the building department.
So they get to know the interiors of these places before they're even up in line.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Ben, are there any other
It's
slides?
just a closing slide.
Oh, I wanted to see the mayor in a minion suit.
That goofy guy. Yeah, well, the chief was there that day too. It was actually it was very cool.
Can you give background, so people don't think you were in the Arctic here
Yeah,
with
so
the
the
mayor?
picture you're seeing here is ice rescue training. So depending on the seasons, we do certain training that time of year. Obviously for cold water, we do ice rescue. So what you're seeing here is the mayor and myself posing after the mayor was nice enough to play the role of a victim. And then after he played the role of a victim, he became a rescuer.
I
So he
pulled
learned
you
the
out.
Techniques
Yeah,
All
it was
right.
fun.
to be a ice rescuer.
Yeah, most of the work is done by the guys on the shore, right?
Can't give away secrets.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
giving away trade secrets here, Mayor.
You did an excellent job.
Okay,
Nothing else. Thank you very much.
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, two
All
Toms
right.
down. We got another Tom, or?
They really didn't need me this year.
Well, you know,
I love it.
it's the PowerPoints, I think. We moved from those kind of clunky three-page things that everybody just read. We were like, let's not read this year. Let's just have PowerPoints. So next up is Mark Price, our Director of Recreation. And Mark, if you could move this a little closer, I was having a little bit of trouble hearing Tom. There.
How's that?
Yeah,
I
good.
was thinking I did a good job on my presentation, but I don't have a picture of Lee doing something.
It's
With the
okay.
The ribbon cutting you
Yes,
have in
okay.
here, don't you? Then you
Oh,
get, pick
yeah.
up a couple people.
Next year, I'm going to invite you to the Raptor Day at the camp so you can have an eagle or something, and I'm going to beat these two guys.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so we're here to discuss the recreation portion of the budget, and we have our little PowerPoint up on the screen. To start, I just wanted to start with thank yous. Thank you to the council for your support over the years in improving our budgets. I thank my fellow department heads and all their staff. There's a great deal that I can't accomplish on an annual basis without the help of the DPW, or the water department, or building department, or any of those. So it really is a team. And I want to thank Susan and Chris for the budget process. You guys have really streamlined it and made it kind of a pleasure to do these years. So thank you for all your hard work. It goes a long way in the finance department. So our goal is to provide programs and make sure the facilities that the city owns and manages are accessible to the community. I couldn't even tell you how many people use our parks. I have a good sense of who uses our programs because they register for them. But everything in that sort of landscape is, we help facilitate, you know. It may be maintained by the Parks Department, but we do keep a lot of schedules and do develop programming, you know, throughout the year. Pretty much year-round department at this point. If we're not doing summer programming, we transition back into after-school programming and community programming throughout the year. Staffing.
Next slide, Ben.
The bullet points are there, just to give you a sort of an overview of us and what we do. As a recreation director, this year I did a great deal with the big capital projects we did. And I'm always there sort of pitching in on you know, program ideas or the software platforms, you know, really a, you know, active business office in a lot of ways. So, you know, I kind of, you know, steer the ship. Heidi Harrison, our assistant recreation director, is here tonight, and she really handles the business side of it, so all the purchasing, paperwork and that process. A great deal to do with the rec center. You know, we have business hours because Heidi is, you know, sure to be there between 9 and 3 at the very least. You know, and handles, you know, communications with the public and use of that space. You know, really is sort of the manager of our rec center in a lot of ways. Sam Britton, who's new this, actually, I think last budget process, we just hadn't hired our replacement for the assistant director, but we brought her on board as our program supervisor and really hit the ground running. You know, kind of got a grasp of what it took to run after school programming, and we've had to do some staffing changes and handle those interviews. She did launch a pilot this year with the youth employment program, which we were able to hire some youth on in 2 different sessions this summer, and we're on to something there, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. And Kira Simino, who's a recreation assistant, but really the boots on the ground. She, you know, assists the after-school program, all 3 sites, make sure they have supplies, you know, handle any behavioral issues, staffing issues, stuff like that, and then kind of transitions over to the summer to be those, you know, that connection between the office and our camp program and stuff. So, you know, it's been a great season, you know, with new staff acclimating, and, you know, we really feel like a team over there.
And then you oversee this whole group of seasonal and part-time employees, and that's a lot of work. So, and that's been made easier by having a full-time HR director. That has really helped a lot.
Yeah, so we have their after-school team, anywhere from 8 to 10 staffers, and in summer we spike up with summer counselors and lifeguards and swim instructors and pool staff and stuff like that. So there's, a lot going on come summer. And
Next slide, Ben.
project highlights. Very tangible results this summer, very noticeable things. Our South Avenue Park took a full remake. Really came out great. You guys were kind of along for the ride, and it was my biggest project to date. A lot of moving pieces. I learned a lot this summer about sort of project management and what it takes to stay on timelines. I will thank every one of our consultants and contractors on the project. We had a very tight timeline, which they got in. We were able to run our summer basketball. Was the biggest concern was not having a home for Beacon Hoops this summer, and we had to rent some lights for a couple of weeks, but besides that, the project was complete when it needed to be.
Yeah, and that one just really seems like it ran almost like a model project, and I know that doesn't happen just by chance. And it was, the scope was really big too, so when we were there for the groundbreaking, and they were like, oh, we're gonna be done by July 4th, I was like, okay. And they were.
It felt like that.
And, I think Mark saved us a lot of money on that because he essentially acted as the general contractor. We could have bid this out to one entity that then subcontracted out all these pieces and put their overhead on it. And by Mark managing it, you didn't have that overhead and the other expenses, their bonds and other things. And so you had 5 contractors on this, including the restroom company, and Mark managed all of them. This was essentially, with the design, over $1 million project, which
Yeah.
is a huge jump for us. And I thought you just did an outstanding job on it, Mark.
Yeah, and it'll settle in by spring. Grass will be in. It'll feel like nothing was disrupted.
And
And I think
the court gets resurfaced
Yeah.
and colored this summer?
Yep, that's our last piece. There was one audible called, right near the end of the project where we needed to pave the basketball court, which we need to wait a year to get surfacing. And surfacing would be that colored surface that really makes it, pop. So
Very
that's
nice.
the last little piece of the puzzle for next year. A little bit smaller a project, but it really came out great, was our skate park over at Memorial Park. Kind of got to a point where the fixtures themselves needed replacing. The surface was on its last leg, so we did a quick flip of that and repaved the whole park and put some fixturing in via the capital project plan. And again, quick turn, but really the results look great. We replaced the fencing. In addition to that, added one of the participation in government projects over there, which was the art wall. So we added an art element to the park, and it all kind of came together nicely. So that was in addition, and pretty much the same timeline as the South Avenue project. So it was a busy few months there with projects.
Mark, can I ask you a question about, are we still dependent on volunteers at the skate park, or is
This much.
city is fully-
Most of the volunteerism initially to build the park and maintain it over the last several years was because of the skate fixtures, the ramps and ledges and stuff. All of that's since been replaced with, I think it has a 20-year warranty steel structure. So a lot of that repair work is not needed anymore. There's a couple volunteers left that are building smaller elements for the park, much more portable stuff that can be replaced easily. We have a little bank of materials still. We've been providing, a couple of the guys that are still involved over there. But yeah, the volunteers and kind of
The lessons, though, are volunteer, correct? Or did
lessons
you
now
pay?
are a tuition-based
Okay.
program, but
Yeah.
great success with those. People are really loving. We run a couple of learn to skateboard clinics, over the year, and has kind of plugged into the park perfectly.
And at the same time Mark did the skate park, he also had the same vendor go down and fix the basketball court at Riverfront. So we didn't put that on, but that's the first time that's been resurfaced in quite a while.
Yeah.
Community events and initiatives. Over the course of the year, again, we've kind of plugged things in that are not necessarily program-based, but, you know, the movie and the park screenings, we do 4 screenings in the summer months, which are a big hit. You know, we really love holding those. The citywide yard sales now in the spring and the fall. Everyone gets to empty out their closets and garages. Very minimal expenses for that, but, you know, people really appreciate those. The 4th of July fireworks, an annual event. You know, were held this year. We had great weather and a good turnout for that. Earth Day cleanups, which are primarily organized by our Conservation Advisory Committee, but we do logistics for that. You know, the Department of Public Works has a couple guys come in and run trucks, and I provide supplies and you know, support that way. But it is it's a great program. This year we were able to plug in some of the high school kids that needed volunteerism hours into Earth Day cleanups and ran our own that way. So it's a great way to start the season in our parks and facilities, you know, just picking up and making them look nice. And then our backyard tree program again this year. I think we almost doubled our tree count from last year, so we had about 70 native trees go out into the community, which was, you know, an afternoon of deliveries and stuff. You know, I think we sold out this year in a lot of ways. I had a bank of trees that we ran right through. My goal next year is to bump that up a little bit and hopefully get to maybe 100 trees. And you know, it's a nice program. It offers super affordable nursery stock to people that may or may not want to plant trees, but they do because, you know, they're reasonably affordable, and it allows us to put more trees in the ground annually, you know, and the trees that are supposed to be here, so that feels good as well. And we deliver, so who can beat that? Settlement camp programs. Our summer programming, essentially our Camp at the Camp program, we were able to stretch out to 6 weeks this year. You know, we had our public pool open for the July and August. We offered our swim lessons, you know, free to Dutchess County residents. You know, and that really, you know, is a resource that gets used by the whole community. I think the pool, if I looked quickly before, and we had, I think 73 or 7,400 swims this summer. Wow. And I looked even closer, and I think it was 1,800 or 1,900 individuals. So we're looking at an average, you know, and that's mostly Beacon residents, almost 100% Beacon residents, and that meant people were coming more than once, you know, 2 or 3 times in the summer if you just looked at it on an average. So it's a very busy summer down there, and people really appreciated it. Plus, it was a swimming summer. It was hot, and, you know, people really enjoyed it.
And Mark, could you talk about the new costs that we implemented so that people, if people don't know about it, next year they can make plans to be at our pool?
Yeah, for Beacon residents, there's a household fee. I believe it was $20 this year, and it covers your entire household for the summer. You know, you book your pool time in advance, but at that cost, it's, you know, pennies to come swimming. You know, a household of 4, you know, it's $5 a head for the summer. You know, I don't think there's any better deal to stay cool and use a pool. Like I said, it does require you to book pool time in advance, but we ironed out the kinks about week 2, and we're able to have open swim times pretty much the whole summer. You know, I don't think we had any issue serving the need that way.
So we dropped
same
that
thing
from
for next year?
it was about $100 to do that previously.
Yeah.
And we didn't want, you know, that fee to be an obstacle to people being able to cool off in the summer or learn to swim.
Great.
And anyone, I'll just say an asterisk on that. You know, again, we book pool time in advance, but that doesn't mean you have to. We had a host of residents that would call on Friday mornings, give us their dates and times. We'd plug them in 30 seconds, and they were good for the week. You know, okay. So anyone that reached out to the department or stopped by, we were happy to book pool time for them, and that would happen on the fly as well. You know, whether it was midweek or not just Fridays, but you know, come summer, we're used to working with people and getting them, you know, to the pool as easily as possible. And then we, you know, in addition to camp programs and all that, summer and spring has some of the sports programs we run, whether it was the Learn to Skate programs or our tennis clinic, our multi-sport clinic. We we facilitate and help several organizations that provide youth sports here in Beacon, whether it's space to do so or help advertising, whether it's girls softball, Beacon Junior Baseball, youth football, soccer, all of those things. Those are programs that either happen near or on city properties. I do want to thank Christina Riccatelli and all the volunteers and coaches of the Beacon Hoops summer program. They served 184 kids this summer. It's a program that touches, a lot of kids, in a very short period of time, and that's all dedicated volunteerism, folks that are there every night to make sure kids can play basketball or have something to do that's positive and outdoors and active this summer. So I don't know what we do without that bank of residents and people that care that much about the kids in the program. So thank you to everyone involved in Beacon Hoops.
Next slide, Ben.
The highlight of, we were in here to present certificates to all the youth that were involved, but our youth employment program that was funded for 2 cycles this summer and last spring, we were able to put 9 youth into part-time jobs with the rec department in a variety of capacities. The spring session, kids were hired and plugged into our after-school programming. The benefit to them was they got their background checks and clearances through the Office of Child and Family Services, so they're viable employees for any youth, program that's permitted under the OCFS. So that's kind of a walk away for them. And for us, it meant TEEDs were involved in the after-school program, so there's a bit of peer, interactions. The younger kids, really identify with the high school kids, and it's a great dynamic. The youth employed this summer, we sort of made a beautification crew out of, again, a pilot, so we were really figuring some stuff out this year, but they would walk Main Street and deal with graffiti and stickers. They would be at the parks to blow off, the playgrounds or do some weeding. They really were kind of hitting the nooks and crannies, over the course of the summer, and learning about their community and learning about their parks and learning about stewardship and, the hope over the long term is, we can plug youth into our community or back into their community or for the first time. I think of Sam telling me about a story of being on Main Street a couple of times, and then by the 3rd time people were waving and saying hi. There's sort of this identification happening, which I think is very important for the youth and very important for the Main Street corridor. And even, Sam had shared a picture with me. One of her youth wasn't working, but she sent Sam a picture of some stickers on Main Street, and it was like, what should I do? And that was exactly what we hoped would happen out of this whole thing.
I know that they called me.
And you can see from the slides, they had the top slide was them. They just finished painting about 40 or 50 barrels to be used as garbage cans for the parks. Those are all fresh, brand new ones, but they thought they were the cat's meow, jumping in and taking that. It is a great picture. I love that picture. And then lower is them prepping the fence over at the skate park for the contractor to come back and remesh it and stuff. So, they were a good bunch of kids this summer, willing to get dirty and sweaty, and, we hope to continue it in 2026. We're currently applying for the next cycle of funding. The hope is to hire youth from January to June and then over the summer months again. So, we're just kind of shaping those things up now. So more.
And how many of these have come into, at least one is now working for us in the after school, correct?
Yep. Yeah, we had one come into the spring session last year, which, then we hired her on for summer as a counselor. And then she turned 18 over the summer, so made her a viable candidate for an after-school position. You have to be 18 or over to count for supervision ratios. So we hired her on. She graduated high school, made her schedule at Dutchess locally so that she'd be free in the afternoons to come work with us. So it's kind of the exact thing we were hoping and looking for once we started this was, to make kids viable employees for, in several different ways, Hope is after the summer crew, maybe comes to us for a season or two, they learn the basic skills that may allow them to be employed, full-time for, the Parks Department or a landscaper or a painting company or something like that. So, sometimes it's just a matter of some basic skills, that make a kid viable for, future employment. They can speak to precisely, an interview question related to skill sets. So, that's the base hope for all of that.
Mark, are we dependent on these grants for these positions to exist?
Currently, yes, yeah. Yeah, we sort of created a pilot based on the funding for it, and then kind of creating a curriculum, based on that, so.
But we're one of the only ones doing it, so the WIB, the Workforce Investment Board at Dutchess County, once we did the first successful grant, I think they were very supportive of us doing the second one, because they don't have a lot of outlets for this money right now. So
Yeah,
we positioned ourselves very well to get these grants next year.
Yeah, I was just worried. I wasn't sure exactly where it was coming from. I didn't know. I thought D.C. may have been referred to Washington, D.C.
No,
So
Dutchess
I was
County.
concerned about federal monies.
Oh, yeah.
Not
No,
me.
Dutchess County Workforce Investment Board, they're, from my understanding, summer funding's a lot easier. They have a lot more outlets, for placement in the summer. It's the shoulder season or the off season that they struggle with placement sites. So they were kind of excited to hear we might be offering it throughout the year, so.
How many people are you hoping to bring in that January to June employment, assuming you get the funding?
I think she's writing it currently for 8 or 9, which we would probably break into 2 different kind of teams to cycle through that, because it's a long period of time, so it'll be part-time, work. So I think 8 to 9, and then it's similar for the summer.
So that's pitched to current high school students, or they could be recent graduates as well, depending on who applies?
I believe they have to be 18 and under. There's a qualification.
Income
Qualification, because the funding is for low-income families. There's a few criteria, and I believe it is, we're unique in that we're a site looking for funding. A lot of times they're in reverse. They fund and then cite kids. So we kind of have communication back and forth. When it's time to advertise, we advertise it, as needed, and, but a lot of times they walk right out of the Beacon community. And we're already putting our feelers out for, we'll be over at the high school for the participation in government class presentations. We do their job fair. We do quite a few things over at the high school. So we're always canvassing for the next kid to hire.
All right, and that's a good segue into the next school slide.
Yeah. Beacon City School Partnerships. Actually, I can just move that. That's amazing. The after-school programs in 3 schools, we've been doing that for close to, I think, 8 years now. That's a tuition-based program at each of the 3 elementary schools here in Beacon. I put a little asterisk. We serve 384 students over 40 weeks of school. Note that that's 4 10-week sessions, so that's kind of a seat count more than a unduplicated kid count. But it speaks to the sort of activity of the program. It's very, very popular. We struggle with access, meaning, we run out of seats before we, the need is met, but we're slowly building capacity there. So next season or so, we have some ideas to expand upon that. Space is a concern at the schools. A lot of times, we have just enough space to operate, the way we currently are. So we're exploring some options, related to expansion there. The participation in budgeting process this year was definitely a little more involved in a couple of presentations at the high school and figuring out where they wanted to spend their participatory budgeting money. This year, the exercise, or the 2 projects, that one basically became volunteer projects, that the kids that proposed them had to be involved in. So both the art wall and the Hidden Brook, sort of picnic spot required the youth that proposed it to kind of rally volunteers and sit with us and discuss the project from, from presentation to completion, including, budgets and, ideas we had for the implementation, materials, plant selection, all kinds of stuff. It was a really, really neat exercise. I really liked the way it turned out. I liked that the kids had to kind of see it through. It wasn't like, idea was set on table and magically appeared. They had to see that, see it through to completion. The art wall was completed by graduation, and the Hidden Brook site was completed just after graduation. So that was my goal, was to see this through and let them graduate knowing they implemented and completed a community work project here in the city. And I think the results were great. We have a little bit of maintenance moving forward, but nothing nothing significant that shouldn't see these two projects sort of flourish in future months. So.
That's great. I mean, I definitely think there's something to be said for not just having an idea, but knowing, like, having to actually get it done and not make it somebody else's job.
Yeah.
And then for both of those, and I guess ongoing, the city will just kind of roll those into our ongoing maintenance. I'm not sure which area would need to support those, whether it's parks or highway or, but-
Most likely parks.
Okay.
Under recreation, under the DPW.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And
It's pretty marginal, though.
Yeah, no, just wanted to understand that because obviously the students who are involved at some point, as you said, graduate. And so I would anticipate that we have to kind of plan for making sure that we keep those places up.
yeah, and under our structured volunteer opportunities moving forward, we have a couple of plans to, have a work day at Hidden Brook and possibly repaint the art wall at the park. So
'Cause
even
the students
independent
need
of that.
hours, so we have now things to plug them into.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good, okay.
And then again, and sort of the last piece, which we over the years have, when the high school reaches out or the National Honor Society, we kind of figure out a place for volunteers to volunteer as best we can. This year we sat down and really thought about it as creating opportunities, instead of just figuring out where to put a few kids. So Sam did a great job of, with those two projects, it was easy to kind of create a couple work days. In addition, we did a just high school sign up Earth Day cleanup, and we were able to plug in some volunteerism at each of the after school sites. And there was an application process. Kids had to submit an application, and we sort of did quick interviews and kind of and cleared them for different projects. And a great deal of them, as you can see, there's a few that got through their civic readiness seal, and other ones that completed their National Honor Society volunteer hours with us. So that was a great plug-in too, and it puts kids at the high school in front of us. Again, these are kids that we could possibly put into the youth employment programs or encourage them to become lifeguards and take a certification and all of that stuff. Our goal is always to try to stay plugged into the youth here, and, sort of the participation in government class is a good starting point, puts us in front of them, captive audience. That's what you're looking for every once in a while.
Ben, next slide.
And then significant proposed changes, really based on salaries, just there's nothing crazy in our budget. Most of it's, program expenses are offset by tuition, so there's not a lot of movement there. And this all increases, CSEA contract increases, again, trying to invest in our after-school staff. Retaining that staff because it's such a unique position and it doesn't have a lot of hours, and but everything we do to increase that, we've been able to retain staff and good staff. That's the other thing. We have some great people that work for the department, whether it's the after school or summer. Amazing people. That get it and allow us to provide the programming at a level that is impressive and engaging and fun, And then the lifeguards is the last one is an increase, and it's kind of a real-time change to staffing levels down there, staffing our swim lessons. The pool is busy from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, so, we're just, trying to keep those salary rates and hourly rates to a competitive level so we can keep lifeguards staffed and you know, it's an investment in our people, period, you know. And all I have is a bald eagle, not Lee.
Ben, last slide, please. And the bald eagle.
No picture of the mayor doing fun stuff, but a pretty cool picture of a community
We
project.
had one of the mayor painting this.
I know.
Um,
I
know, I
We should
know.
have
Sorry.
popped that, and or the basketball one.
Yes, yes. So that's sort of the finished product over there. What you're looking at is the completed community mural on the South Avenue project bathroom. That whole building was muraled by Joe Pimentel with the help of our community. So over the course of a couple of days, people came down and helped paint that in. So our community is literally baked right into those murals. So I'm happy. I smile every time I drive by it.
And people have respected it,
Mhm.
which was what we had hoped.
Zero graffiti to date.
So far.
Yeah.
I have one comment. So you've showing us rec at 660 grand, that budget, university settlement at 100. There's also the pool, which is 90, and then the adult recreation, which is a paltry 10 grand for seniors. I always keep wondering why that's not more. And then if I add the park budget, which sits over in DPW at 280, that gets you $1,150,000, which is sort of our investment in parks and recreation. If I compare that to 2010, that $1,150,000 was $260,000. If I compare it to 2015, those 5 budgets were 400. Right, so we've done a substantial increase in the operating side. That doesn't count the capital side.
Right.
Right, which is several $1 million in Green Street, South Avenue, Memorial, and more to come. Right?
And I would just say that's testament to Mark's patience and ability to develop that department. We've come a long way.
Yeah, very
And
much.
we're not stopping.
Yeah, I could, you know, I've been here since 2008, so we weathered sort of the bad financial times, and from 2014 forward, it's just been go, you know, and that's because you guys have supported, you know, the concepts and the department, you know, and, you know, give us some time and some money and we'll do more stuff. You know, that's sort of the mantra over there. A little bit of time, a little bit of money, and good stuff comes.
Yeah, speaking of the projects that you have done, I think, I'm guessing this shows up in the line item under Settlement Camp Electric, which was a lot more this year than it's been in previous years, and I'm assuming that's related to some of the work that you were doing in that area that you've had done. I'm curious if you can speak to what's going on over there.
That's me.
Yeah.
It's not really you.
Oh, okay.
It's how it falls within the cycle of being offset by the solar farm. So this one just happened to not be offset by the solar farm, where others picked up more of it.
Okay, so this coming year,
It's a billing cycle
Okay.
of when it falls, so it
so is
just...
that why our budget's increasing,
It-
just
it
in
did.
case?
Yep.
It also falls? All right, great, excellent. You can still talk about the settlement camp stuff if you want.
Still doing wonderful things up there, but...
Yeah, yeah. So you guys came and had a nice walk with us a couple weeks back, and you know, it's our 55-acre, you know, sort of woodland park here in Beacon. It's the home of our summer programs. It's the home of our public pool. It's a home of an event space that we use throughout the year for weddings and gatherings and festivals and stuff like that. It really has, over the course of probably the last 4 or 5 years, since our new caretaker came on board, Andrew Stevens, you know, we've really been, you know, sort of doubling down on the management and maintenance of the property. So it's really, you know, we're kind of clearing the past off it and getting rid of invasives and really just trying to shape up the property aesthetically. And it shows, you know, the future is bright. You know, I'm not sure where we're headed. We're definitely going to be running our summer programming there. Definitely the pool will be open as long as she opens. You guys, you know, signed that resolution asking the state to turn it over to us. And, you know, if that happens, when it happens, I should say, I wouldn't say it wouldn't happen, but when it happens, that'll really allow us to consider the properties long-term. You know, come up with a capital plan and start, you know, investing in the facilities a little bit more, and make a lot more of that property viable. We're obviously sort of hibernating portions of it because it needs maintenance and structural work and stuff like that. But, independent of that, it's a absolutely vibrant park, with our disc golf course and like I said, the summer activity. It gets a little quieter in the winter because, but the disc golf course, 365 days a year, there's somebody on that disc golf course. I've been told it's a destination course for the New England area, so, which I don't get, but I get, when I look in the parking lot, there'll be 6, 7 states, some guy pulled in one weekend and was headed home to Maryland from Maine and was a disc golf course, so he got off the highway and, him and his trailer, they got stuck on the property because they were trying to pull in to play a round of disc golf, and he finally figured it out. But it's that type of property, and, it's absolutely magical setting. There's something magical about the property. I don't know how to put that in better words, but it's been a place of recreation for, since the turn of the century in some capacity. So I think we're, just maintaining the legacy of that. When it was a summer camp, it was vibrant. I run into people all the time that have been there as kids or met as teenagers or worked there as 20-something-year-olds. And, these are people in their 60s and 70s and 80s, just coming back to the property to visit because they had such a connection to it and a time there. And I think under our management and sort of stewardship, the same thing is happening. I have kids involved in my camp that came as, 6 and 7-year-olds that are now working for us and, have that same sort of affinity for summer and camp program and stuff. So I look forward to, what's to come and hopefully your continued support.
Everybody good?
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Great
Mark.
job.
Thank you.
So then, next, Susan's going to go over some of the 3 largest non-departmental costs, which are a sizable part of the budget. And then we thought we'd open up and we could have a discussion about the housing position that some of you have talked about. So do you want to run through your, Ben, can you pop that one graphic up?
Sure. I just wanted to speak a little bit about some large items that don't fall necessarily within the individual's budgets, presentations that you're seeing. The first one, are you having trouble?
Ben, do you need me to share, or do you?
Nope, I have it. One moment.
And if you could just
There's no pretty
increase the-
pictures, there's no, nothing with the mayor.
We had photos. She wouldn't put them in.
I want to transfer
hat
to the
photo didn't
recreation
even make it
department.
No hats.
Have fun. So the first one I wanted to take a look at is the New York State pension, which is comprised of New York State employee retirement system and New York State police and fire retirement system. So we have two pensions that we contribute to in the city. So in 2026, there is a little over $3 million in the budget for this year's contribution to the New York State retirement, which is up from 2.7 last year, for a $333,000 increase, and this is across the 3 funds. This is significant. It makes up 8%, a little over 8% of our total budget. So, wanted to point that out.
And this is both standard retirement and police? It's
I'm
all
sorry,
the,
standard.
yeah, this is all the pension funds?
This is all of it. There is New York State ERS, which is
Yeah.
all the employees that, besides police and fire. And then police and fire has a separate retirement fund. So the city on an annual basis contributes on behalf of the employees between, depending on what tier they are, between 14 and 40% of their annual salary. So tier 2, which is based on when you were hired. So employees that are in tier 2, the city can contribute up to 40% of their annual salary to the New York State Retirement Fund. Tier 6, which was put on, which is a much lower cost, is between 13 and 19% of that individual's annual income. The next item is health insurance. So health insurance is comprised of health, dental, vision, also Medicare Part B reimbursements. And across the three funds, it's comprised of $5.4 million, which is up from $4.9 million last year, for an increase across the three funds of $546,000. The health and dental vision makes up almost 15% of our total budget. The employees do contribute to that, and we also have retirees on our plan as well. So this amount covers 99 active, so employed people right now, and 121 retirees we cover. As you can see, that's the single most biggest item in our entire budget. The next item is debt service, which is the principal and interest that we are paying on our serial bonds that we've issued. Actually, the current bonds are the bonds we issued between 2016 and 2021. There's also a portion in here for a bond anticipation note interest that we anticipate in borrowing in the next month or so, and interest will become due in 2026 on that. The debt service accounts for 11% of our total budget. So between those three items, it accounts for 34% of our total budget. So just pointing those things out, just so when you're looking at each department, there's still all these larger items that really eat up a large portion of the budget that really we can't structurally change.
Okay.
That's really it. There's not really.
Cool. And then we're gonna, Nick is gonna come back to the table for the discussion about housing.
So any questions on these three items? Okay.
And again, the main changes on the budget are those three items and salaries.
Okay. And I guess, just before we talk, we heard from the chief that he has a need. I remember hearing from, I think, you last year that there was kind of almost a wish list of like staffing stuff. So I don't know that we need to get into that right now, but it might be helpful to understand the kind of staffing outlook.
Okay.
Or like what kind of priorities. Like, I'm thrilled that we're getting a deputy city administrator. I think that's a really positive step. But what are some of the other things that we're trying to ramp up to over the next couple of years would be helpful to understand as well.
Okay.
Again, don't need an answer right now, but
okay.
just.
Whenever.
I do have a little bit of an answer for that.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
actual no new positions. While we might, removing a title, there's actual no new positions in this
Right.
budget.
Kind of
Yes.
Ben is just being upgraded
Right.
to that new position.
Upgrading it, we're investing in our current workforce, but we're also looking at succession planning. So whereas maybe there is a city administrator that might retire in 5 years, or another department head, we're looking who's the next person coming up, trying to create efficiencies within departments, and also providing training to move the current people up and take over those positions as people are retiring.
Okay.
And in terms of the wish list, I'll just make it easy. I have wishes, but I think needs for me have to trump the wishes.
That was probably the wrong term. for
It
me
is
to
the
use,
wrong
but
term, I'm sorry.
I think you understand
I-
the point of the question.
I do. And it would be fire. I think that's our most vulnerable spot right now in terms of not having adequate staffing.
Okay.
Yeah, everything else can kind of wait for us. Ben is, again, the new deputy city administrator position, I think we're envisioning will have a role with housing and other community services and coordinating that. I think we're looking to turn the Recreation Department further towards that, in addition to, we've built a lot of capacity, and I think we have some capacity to turn towards that, and Ben would kind of coordinate that and become our liaison to those issues,
Okay.
our expert on those issues.
And I heard you on the fire, and that would be 3. I actually would be remiss if we didn't say the next one would probably be in finance. So,
And is that specifically procurement or any particular area of finance, or more someone who's able to do multiple things?
Most likely, it would be consolidating the procurement.
Yeah.
So taking that off the department heads, more of perhaps a purchasing agent, relieving some of the staff currently that is working on that in order to accomplish all the other goals that we have. We are very, it's unfortunate that I can't move at the speed that I'd like to move because we don't have adequate staffing. We just cannot get there even with overtime. So I'd like to bring it to the next level.
And again, we've built some additional capacity this year by offloading some of the stuff that Susan's staff had to do onto the part-time, temporary, now full-time HR position. And we're seeing what else we can shift over on that too. So a lot of this is just trying to figure out how to not tip over in terms of these long, when you take on a new employee, it's a commitment, particularly with civil service and our collective bargaining agreements. And it's hard to get rid of. It's really easy to add a position. It's a lot harder to get rid of it. And so we're trying to make our growth incremental and sustainable, and trying to figure out better ways of doing things that save time.
Efficiencies, we've been doing this, I've been doing this since I started here. I knew I was not going to get new staff, but we could create efficiencies and streamline process, and that's what we've done.
Great.
Yeah, I saw in the budget that there's still the 75,000 line item under the city council, and I know when we were talking about this roughly this time last year, there was the idea that that would go to a variety of city council priorities, and I appreciate we haven't kind of focused on that this calendar year, or this fiscal year, but I'm wondering for next, particularly around housing. I know when we had a conversation around housing earlier this year, there was the idea of capacity, like an internship or something to help with that, so I'm wondering, as Ben sets the vision, it makes sense for him to be the liaison. I'm also thinking about the building department. I know they've had capacity constraints, and just understanding what their needs are related to housing, and so I'm thinking of at least part of this 75K going towards doing some of the additional work that maybe Ben doesn't have the hours for, to kind of help look into things. I'm personally, you kind of asked for some details, particularly interested in the supports we offer to our large and growing rental community, both the tenants and the landlords, sort of understanding things. It's great that we have the website. Now, how do we get that out there? How people have questions, navigate that. So what are models around that? And just what are our other gaps? There might be things that we're kind of aware of that just haven't been surfaced. So knowing that Ben might have at least some capacity to dig into that, and then might then have an outline of this as a kind of future path for kind of addressing our needs. And so I appreciate kind of thinking about where can we start this coming year to put more focus on that, to put more capacity towards that, even if we can't go straight to even a part-time staff member, that we have to first kind of really identify our needs. And though I won't be on city council come January, I would hope that ideally in the first half of 2026, it'd be great if Ben could at least share with the city council just some initial framing, what's his plan, what's your plan, together with him to kind of address things, maybe an opportunity to gather some of the input from the community about what needs they're having, so that we can kind of help focus where we can actually get the most bang for our buck, and what are the immediate needs that we can address.
I think we're going to also add it into his actual job title, so it's not just about the person, it's about the title. So this kind of set of housing, other community service issues can be coordinated through that, and then Ben can work with the various department staff that address those and also work with external stakeholders. I mean, I think Ben and I have kicked around ideas. Number one, making that $75,000, which is now labeled as planning, just making it more, making it broader by saying initiatives, city council initiatives, and then it can give us some leeway to work beyond just planning. We would put it in his job description to oversee housing. I would also suggest it include training for Ben. He's willing to go and learn best practices and start to collect things that other people are doing, and then our hope is to coordinate with all of the entities that touch some part of this. You know, we don't have regular communication with a lot of the people that are doing housing and doing this type of work and other community services. So I think one of the things we've also talked about is renaming recreation to reflect this kind of new focus and calling it the Department of Recreation and Community Services. Susan will tell you the budget line that New York State provides actually puts community services with recreation, and I think we could just reflect that in the budget. So again, I think what would be helpful to Ben and me is if you could translate the things that you're hearing in the community to what the deliverables you're looking for, and then, you know, set the goals and the objectives, kind of like you did with participatory budgeting, and then let us try to figure out how to get there. And I think we can. We're also looking at some possible change of function of another staff person who I think could really augment the recreation department. And again, that's a little early for public consumption, but I think we hear you that this is something that's important. The last 5 years, we've been really just trying to plow through the backlog of capital investments, and I think we can turn and start really hitting this as hard as we have capital investments.
So I just want to add a little bit of comparisons that I did over in Kingston. I had the opportunity to talk to an alderman who was a former city council member here, so knows our city really well, and obviously knows Kingston. So, Chris, Kingston has more than double our budget?
Yeah, so we're at, our general budget is about
27.
It's 27, and they're at about 60.
Okay. So that's the first thing. Obviously, they're a much bigger community. But I asked about housing, and I was told that about half the position is spent on city-owned properties, foreclosed properties, or abandoned properties, of which Beacon has 0, or pretty close to 0. Right, so Kingston had 300 abandoned properties in 2020, has about 100 now. Those are properties the city doesn't own just yet, but, you know, in one form or another, nobody's in them. Either it's in the bank process, it's a zombie, you know, property. And then the ones that they foreclose on, and Nick, when was the last time we foreclosed on a property? We got one going on?
Correct. We have one currently going on, but the state has sort of changed the law, and there's more housing programs in effect to assist homeowners who are being foreclosed upon for non-payment of taxes.
Right, and you know, the way that Beacon took this on was to say, we don't want to take on a foreclosed property. We want to give a homeowner every opportunity to pay it back and to get, you know, out from under their back taxes. And so we kind of like not having any. So from what I was told, about half of the program up in Kingston deals with that. It's also a moneymaker because they foreclose properties and they can sell them off, and that actually generates, you know, coverage for the position. Then another piece of the puzzle of the remaining half, part of it is trying to solicit developers on the larger scale that we're already seeing down here, because Kingston is further north, 1, and 2, kind of further behind the recovery process that Beacon's gone through. And so we don't have a lot of difficulty attracting developers. And the developers we do have, as you can see from the winner of the TOD project down at the waterfront, are experts in doing affordable housing. and we're seeing them come to here, so that the kind of advice that someone might be able to offer them who has a single position in a small city, I think pales in comparison to what some of our developers do day to day and also experience from interacting with folks. The last piece that I heard was a substantial portion of the time is spent advising tenants. And what I was told was that the tenants' numbers are higher in Kingston than they are in Beacon, one. And two, I asked the question, well, does the county have a 211 tenant hotline? And the answer was no. And so Beacon can rely on the county resource, which Kingston cannot rely on, for basic advice. Now, Kingston has a program of referrals to legal services, but that's what the county does on our behalf for the entire county. So those are the bits that I was able to discern by, talking to a former council member here who's now an alderman there. I could learn some more, but from what I can tell, Kingston's in an extremely different position than we are with respect to this. This doesn't negate what Chris said about the importance of us starting to move in that direction, but I just don't think we have to do it in terms of an entire position on day one.
And I also worked with Kingston a lot when I was Deputy Director of Planning for Ulster County, and they're much further developed than we are. They have a whole in-house planning department. They have an in-house engineer. They have corporation counsel that isn't a consultant, it's in-house, and it's several people. They have an arts and culture project. They have a purchasing department with a director of purchasing. And so their current FTE count is over 200, and our current full-time employee count is 130. Their fire department is 3 times as large as ours. They're by budget and also by staffing. Their police department is more than twice our budget. And again, I think George had asked me, size-wise, we're about 5 square miles, and they're almost 9 square miles. Their valuation is, looks like it's about $3 billion, ours is 2.25. So we are catching up on that. But they're much further along because they were the only city in Ulster County, and they benefited from being the primary recipient of the sales tax, whereas we split with Poughkeepsie.
Oh yeah, they get a better percentage than we do.
They do.
Of sales
So,
tax.
I obviously know that there are clear differences between Beacon and Kingston. It's 2 different places in 2 different counties. That's obvious. I think that, I hope that everyone at the table here would agree that housing is a major concern for the community. I think some of the issues that we are hearing that impact our community are specifically things like displacement, things like making sure that rental properties are maintained, and that we're able to offer assistance to people that are facing eviction to try to get that problem resolved before it becomes an eviction. And again, I also acknowledge that the county does have some resources that assist with that as well. Again, just kind of talking about what I have been hearing from the community in terms of what they're looking for, not necessarily a replica of what Kingston has. The other opportunity, I think, and this may be where, our planning area comes in, and I think we have done quite a bit of this, but there's more that we can do. What are the things that we can look at from a council policy perspective in terms of zoning, how we manage that within our city to encourage more, housing supply? What can we do in terms of, kind of the supply and demand ratios that we have? I'm not sure how our short-term rental legislation and enforcement is going, that kind of thing. So I think there's some functions that maybe span different areas of the city. And I would ask other council members to chime in. Those were kind of some of the main themes that I have been hearing that I think would be really helpful for the council to address. There could be a variety of ways that we do that, but that's kind of what I've had in my mind.
I would agree. And, we had the people come from the county, and really, from what I am hearing from the residents in Beacon, that isn't, emergency housing isn't the issue. It's how can they stay in their rental and not feel that they're going to get priced out the next lease cycle. And that is happening tremendously here. Are they going to be on the street? Not necessarily, but it's going to increase their percentage of their take-home pay to be able to live in Beacon. And, I mean, a big thing is you hear, you know, people who graduated Beacon High School can't afford to live in Beacon. I know myself, I have 3 children, and none of them live in Beacon. They would like to, but they can't afford it. So that is a huge thing to hear, and to hear that, you know, our school's doing well, everybody graduates, and then they're gone because they can't come back here to make it continue be their home. And that is huge.
I don't think any of these things are necessarily easy to solve, or else this wouldn't be a problem that a lot of communities are facing. But I do think there's maybe some additional resources that we could tap into as consulting or to help us with some of these questions. Anyway.
Yeah, the bits I can talk about in terms of the concerns that I think we all hear is, whether someone is in a lease now and is going to see an increase, that's a legal advice issue to which Dutchess County can take on a hotline, can provide basic advice, and can make a referral to legal services. That is the only fundamental way that you have an impact on whether someone can stay in a place, is through that mechanism. And that's what the county can offer. It's not just emergency housing. The other one that is raised, which I think also makes sense, is looking at some of our zoning or our other laws. I, for one, am willing to take another look at the short-term rental law because, look, we're in a housing shortage, and short-term rentals take away from long-term rentals. And if it takes making them illegal, I'm willing to have that discussion. If it takes, clamping down on it, limiting them, doing something, better enforcement, I'm not sure. Maybe we can bring on our building department inspector and have that discussion. But I think I'm trying to actually translate it to actions. Obviously, the most relevant action is building more housing, right? And I know we can't solve the entire region's problems in Beacon, but we can certainly do our part. I think when I compare to the county and talk to the county, we're building more than other places are building, which obviously, creates some strains on the community, but it also creates housing. So those are the things I think we can work on. I'm happy to have more ideas.
Well, I'd say that, the single best thing I think we've done is, both on the state and local level, is the good cause eviction law.
Mm-hmm.
And as good as it is, and I think Beacon's is even better than New York State, it's hard for people to interpret it necessarily. And I think what we could do on the website is have a frequently asked questions from our lawyer about frequently asked legal questions, because there is an opportunity to go, to get free legal services, but it's all income-based. And if you're being forced out by the end of the month and you just got a note from your landlord, you don't have the opportunity or time to speak to someone, qualify for the free legal services. So if we could, on the website, at least have frequently asked questions specific to the good cause eviction and what protections there are, the basic protections, and even basic legal questions regarding anything housing related. So I think that's what we could do. It's there, the law is there, it's just how it's understood by the people, particularly when they're vulnerable and when there's, being shown a rent increase by their landlord.
I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think there's very constructive advice that's had here. Constructive items I would add to this, we've talked about Ben as a resource in his new position, but I think something very concrete we can do is have a clear indication of a job description, in essence. A clear indication of his role and including what he would do related to these housing issues. Just remove it from the abstract and let's just see it on paper, and, what actually is going to be done. To the good, building on what George said, I was thinking, and what Lee said, there are resources at the city and county level, but there's we need indication of how we take advantage, how citizens could take advantage of those resources. And we've heard from lots of people that having it just on the website is not sufficient. So some portion of the budget could have even just printed copies of that FAQ, for example, that George mentioned, available to people to come grab and pick up, and potentially the role that Ben could have is as an advocate or someone just to be there to answer those questions pointedly, or just making sure we identify who those are. Ultimately, there's still ongoing questions. I think, Amber, your list is great, other ones that we've identified. So I think there still will be gaps, and so continuing the conversation, identifying those gaps, and then continuing to have these discussions about how to address them is where it's at. But hopefully we can fill in some of those gaps with what I just suggested.
A couple ideas that we also talked about. This kind of merges with the communication. We're going to try to start at least a quarterly and then hopefully a monthly newsletter early next year. I'm not far enough along on projects to have gotten to it. I'm sorry. I was trying to get to it for October 1 and we didn't get there. That would partially contain information about housing. One of the other things we'd like to do is try to help people get to our digital resources like the Rave 911 and then sign up for these resources for the newsletter and then get them out that way, but also to print them. We actually would mail these for the first couple times. The other thing is setting up a task force. There's no regular meeting between all of the entities that touch this issue. The last time the mayor and I communicated with the Beacon Housing Authority was probably when the last director was there. And there's a new director, and I think if we have a working group of some of the, and it may be beyond housing, it may be broader community needs, and have people meeting on a regular basis so that we understand what resources are available and then also who can help whom. We don't even, I haven't even met the person from the Salvation Army in all these years. I know only because I've gone looking for them, some of the other contacts, but we don't routinely meet. And I think just having that kind of monthly or bi-monthly meeting of a working group that has a focus on improving this, that can share information, that can network, and then, somebody at the health clinic if somebody has an issue, and then we can wrap around other services. So I think we can turn towards this. I do hear you, Jeff, about the job description. We're developing that now, and I'll hopefully have something back to you, because I'd like to do that appointment towards the end of the year and just lock it in if we could. It can be, it wouldn't be valid until January 1 because it's not in the budget, but we could certainly line it up.
I think that idea of a task force is a really good idea, and I think also needed, because there is a lot of cross-departmental, some of this is like building department and code enforcement, and some of it's going to be Natalie with planning, and, I don't know, there's probably a ton of other places where people can be engaged, and I think hearing from places like Beacon Housing Authority, or, places like
South Davies
Tompkins
Terrace,
yeah, like what are the needs, what can we help with? How can we be better connected with what's going on? And I'm sure they know who in the community needs help or is in need of services. So I think that's a really good idea.
We're having a conversation soon with the Catholic Church about their adaptive reuse at some point of Hidden Brook, of the Carmelite. And they're looking at that for some type of low-income housing. So that would be another player at the table. And we just don't have anybody that's rounded all that information up. We don't, and Ben really can be that repository so that he becomes the expert on our staff and then can kind of coordinate the staff below him on STRs, on other enforcement. Some of that is, Molly, you had asked before about capacity, and I think we have the capacity we need. We just need time to play it out. We got really behind on basic fire safety inspections during COVID, and our new building inspector and our new deputy building inspector have been doing an amazing job getting us out of that hole. We've prioritized that because it's just so directly tied to health and safety, and we haven't done as much on the STRs. But again, I'd be open, like the mayor, to look at your regulatory framework and see if it's actually, it's been very difficult to enforce. And we've talked about maybe what you do is you phase them out. So over a period of time, you know, people who have invested in them don't lose that investment overnight, but you have a goal of, at this point, these are going to be gone, and that sends a message to your market, too, to bring more hotel rooms or other, you know, dwellings that are different than a short-term rental onto market. And again, we even want to look at things like fees. We had somebody raise to us that some tenants are having to pay a full month's rent to a realtor for the fees for just getting an apartment. So we can look at those. I want to also look at obstacles to getting an apartment and other things that tip people over from an apartment. I mean, I think you've also done a good job. One of the sectors we don't talk about a lot are people who've owned their houses for a long time and are here. And we've done some substantial things to help them with the increase we did in our tax exemption for people now who make up to $50,000. Also, just keeping the tax increases somewhat reasonable.
Yeah.
Again, that's only one sector, the displacement, but I think we've taken some actions on that, and we can probably do more.
Do we have any say on the FICO thresholds for the workforce affordable housing? It kind of drives me crazy that they're looking for like sterling credit on a lot of those.
I don't know that we do. This has just come up too because we have somebody who's trying to get in a BMR unit, and the landlord is saying, well, they don't meet our criteria. And it's like, well, they meet our criteria.
Yeah.
Nick and I have encountered several things that we need to work on the BMR law, the below market rate. Things that now that we're well advanced into it and we now have almost a portfolio of 60 apartments, we're realizing are coming up, like how to manage it, how to do compliance, how to pay for that compliance, which really maybe wasn't that well thought out in the beginning.
Okay.
So there are improvements on that law just to keep it valid. Like part of it is sales too, and we never factored in specifically homeowner fees, but we've now, we recognize that issue came up and we get it on the land use approval end. So before anybody gets their land use approval, we make sure we see the bylaws and declaration. Nick, if you want to say anything.
I think that's
further.
right, Chris. I think the BMR law has evolved over time, and now we're working with it more. We have a larger number of units. It's growing through a process. Hudson River Housing has been very good with identifying these issues. What's interesting is the issues they identify, other communities don't have solutions to either. So we're really looking at this with a fresh set of eyes, but not too much guidance from other communities in New York State. And these are good, practical questions that come up that are deserving of a response. So Chris and I have spoken with Hudson River Housing over the past couple of months of sort of identifying these issues, trying to come up with best practices. What are the hurdles, what are barriers are in the way, and how we can remove those.
Okay.
Both from the administration, the advertising of them, the resale of them, and things of that nature.
Other comments? This is, and you said this, Jeff, this is a really good conversation because I think we're putting some ideas on the table. The housing group, I think, is very interesting because I think it will take some different areas to kind of come together. You know, just being able to take the affordable complexes that we have and be able to have a single place where here are the ones you can apply for, here's who might have openings.
Yeah.
You know, here's issues that they're finding. I mean, I think there's some value just in, you know, sharing information amongst groups.
I assume we won't get to this conversation, or in depth at least, till by the end of the year. And if so, I would hope that those that remain on the council will continue that conversation going forward, because
Yes, George.
I don't think we have a choice.
Even though I'm departing. Yeah.
But again, I think we can take, I would rename that one line of planning to initiatives and let us come up with some ideas. Because there might be, once we start to meet, there might be interventions that we come back and say, let's try this. I like to pilot things before we go all in, and we've done that successfully with a number of things, including participatory budgeting. And most times they've worked out really nicely. So again, maybe leave us some room to do some pilots. We're going to have a little bit of that conversation on the community fridge at the end too. Because I think there's always a couple different ways you can get to the same place.
Yeah, I think that I'm down with changing it to initiatives, and I think also just the idea of making sure that whatever cadence makes sense for you, and Ben bringing it back to this body and the community that we're working on it. Just kind of starting with what I said, that $75K that we talked about a year ago ended up not being used, but I do take, at least some of the responsibility for that, because we didn't advocate for specific things. So now that we're getting into more of the nitty-gritty, and it sounds like there's already energy, there's already stuff on our website to make sure that momentum continues. Even if it takes 6 months to a year for the task force, as an example, to come together, there might be other things that we can do sooner rather than later.
And we didn't use it too, Molly, because some of it was for planning, and I actually got the county to pay for the planning. So I was going to announce in the next couple weeks, we do have a comprehensive pedestrian study that Creighton Manning Engineering will be doing, and it will be paid for fully by the Dutchess County Transportation Council at a cost of about $40,000. There's no local match, and it would basically do an overview of where the sidewalks exist and what condition they're in, where the ADA facilities are, where do we have ramps, where do we need to replace them, where any other devices are, like the push-button crossing devices. It would identify these gaps. It would look at, it would map them on GIS so that we could have them interface with the other things that we're collecting, like our stormwater system and our water and sewer infrastructure. And then we can actually bring that back to the council, and you can work to prioritize, like, here are the gaps, you can actually see them. Here are the red areas that are absolutely in need of changing out. Where, given limited funding, do you want to invest? And we've kind of done this, like, if you go down South Avenue between South Davies Terrace and the Beacon Housing Authority, that's actually become one of our nicest streets, because we've put 3 rounds of CDBG money there, and we have a 4th. We just finally got a contract for the CDBG to do the Wolcott area between South Avenue and the Housing Authority. So, like, part of the reason you didn't use the 75 is because we were lining up an external funding source for it. And I'm excited because they bring a level of expertise in managing the project. Again, they're the ones who did that Beekman study that now has led to us getting a grant of now $3.6 million out of $3.8 million. So
That's great to hear.
Yeah, and did you hear the Beekman went from, it's now 3.6 instead of 3?
The state put in 15% on Beekman.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. If the federal money comes.
Yeah, and again, we're circumspect about anything related to the federal government right now. I do know I have a tariff coming now on the centrifuges because we got the bill. So.
Okay. Are we okay to keep going?
He drops that bomb.
Huh?
9 p.m. Tell me now.
All right.
9 p.m.
Busted the budget.
I didn't bust the budget. We'll
I haven't
work
seen
it
the
out.
bill yet.
We haven't decided if we're paying it or the contractors.
Appointment of Aiden Harrison to Highway Department laborer.
All right. So this is someone who's worked for us seasonally for 2 years, and they've worked out well. We have a laborer position who is on long-term disability at this point, kind of going off of our staff, and we wanted to backfill this with Aiden Harrison, no relation to Heidi Harrison. I know you all were wondering that. And Aiden lives in Newburgh, worked for us 2 summers, was really great, mowing parks, helping with the milling and paving. We'd like to bring him on and then have him trained to, again, thinking about succession, I would like to I'm going to have Dave Way retiring at some point, Sean DeToro, and we want them to start teaching people below them some of the skills that they have.
Okay. Great.
All right. Certification of base proportions, such an excitement. Nick?
Yep. Ben, if you could put up my PowerPoint with a picture of a mayor paying his taxes.
One moment.
So I tried to make this an exciting topic, but I really can't. So this is something the council does on an annual basis. It's required by New York State. It's formulaic. It is required. The city assessor works with the New York State to determine the base proportion, the adjusted base proportion, so that the tax levy by the city in the budget can be allocated in a proportion among the residential properties, homestead, and the commercial properties, non-homestead. And there are two forms that the council is certifying, and in your packet you'll see one of them on the top left is Real Property Form 6701, and the other is Real Property Form 6703. And these are all prepared by New York State and with information that Kathy goes through with the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. But it does require that the legislative body certify that these are the accurate information. Kathy has reviewed this, our office has also reviewed it, and what's interesting this year is that for the first time, I think in a while, the percentage for non-homestead has actually increased. Typically, when the city elected to go for the non-homestead taxing system, one of the few municipalities in New York State that has done so, there was a opportunity to apportion the taxes a certain percentage to commercial properties and a certain percentage to residential. The state requires that each year you then look at what is the ratio, how much of your city is now commercial versus residential property, and you need to adjust that each year based upon what the formula was set in the beginning in 1995, I think it was. And so your commercial tax base has generally gone down, which means the portion of your tax levy applied towards the residential properties has increased over the years. This time it's going down. Kathy reports that the commercial growth and market increases in that sector has led to the non-homestead rate increasing. And in our memo and in our resolution, we sort of go through that. So the first form, 6701, is really looking at, okay, what was the base percentage, how was that determined, and what are the base proportions? So that's sort of the if you will, I'm saying the word base a lot, the baseline. The second form, 6703, says, okay, you know what your base is now and what it was in the past. How are we adjusting that? How is the ratio going up? And the ratio that you should look at is on the form 6703, and on the bottom right, under column R, the adjusted base proportion. So it's for homestead, it's 72.02966, and for the non-homestead, it's 27.97034. Go ahead and look to the left on column P, on the same form, 6703, and you'll see that's what the proportion was last year. So last year for homestead, homesteads were paying 73.3894% of the tax levy. This year we'll be paying less, we'll be paying 72.02968 of the tax levy. For the non-homestead, it's increased from the 26.61% to the 27.97%. And in your packet, we have a draft resolution that goes through what I've just explained to you and sets forth what the adjusted base proportion is that will be applied towards the tax bill. So I hope I've either explained it enough or confused you enough that you don't want to ask me a question.
Great job.
Thank you. Which one?
All of it. It's good.
It was exciting, too.
So exciting.
I was thrilled.
So, yeah, just to add some more numbers to make it even less clear. In terms of our assessments in our tax base, about 80% is residential, meaning homestead, and about 20% is non-residential. So think about 80-20. But as you just heard, the adjusted base proportions are 71 and 29, meaning that, okay, homes are 80% of the value, but are only paying 71% of the tax,
Yes.
right? Which is why the rate for the commercial side is so much higher, okay? And so the way that you can make that work is the commercial rate pays for a portion of, if we didn't have two rates, what would be more being shifted to the residential side, okay? I don't know, I don't really still ever have understood how they shift from year to year, but whatever.
When you get to R in the alphabet, that's a lot of calculations.
I know. And that's just on that page as opposed to the prior page. Anyway.
Yes. Yep,
Any-
so there's a resolution in your agenda packet for next week to
approve.
certify that base proportion.
Everybody good?
Yes.
Yeah, and the only other resolution we'll be bringing is to set the public hearing for the budget on this topic. We have other resolutions. But, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Susan.
And then discussion on refrigerators.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce this and then I'm going to hand it off. So we, over the past weeks, there's been an increasingly public discussion about the two community fridges that were in the city. One was originally located at Pinnacle Books, the other at the Rec Center at 23 West Center Street. I'm going to ask Nick to kind of walk through what happened to get us here today. I'm not going to show the photos again that I showed the other day, but you know, when we went and did an inspection on September 24th at the Rec Center, the condition of the fridge was so bad that we made a call to remove it at that point. The mayor came down, verified that, you know, we were well beyond, almost every bit of food in it was not fit for human consumption. The whole environment was pretty concerning. We didn't want to talk about that again tonight because the issue really isn't how well it was maintained or not maintained. The issue really is the model of delivery. And I think we want to talk about the concerns that Nick flagged as we went through this. And then I would like Heidi and Mark to come up, who have had to deal with this on the ground for 5 years. We recognize that during COVID, this played a really important part of dealing with that crisis, as did our parklets. Remember, we did some extraordinary stuff that we never did before. And it helped because social gatherings were not allowed, you couldn't do anything indoors. So having an outdoor fridge made a lot of sense, particularly at a time when people had a lot of need. People were being, you know, their income was being cut, they didn't have the supports that they needed. We're now, you know, we decided at a point, okay, the parklets were through, we did that for 2 years, and we're moving towards that same position on these fridges. They played a vital role, but these, I think Mark is going to talk about all the food services that we support in the city, and you'll see that these are a tiny part of it, but they are the bulk of the risk, the liability, and the concerns. And so, again, like the housing, I think we have some proposals at the end we'd like to throw out. So I'm going to ask Nick, and then Mark and Heidi, if you can come up, I'm going to recede here.
Thank you, Chris.
You want to join us, please?
And Chris, this is also a discussion that you and I had several months ago when this was first brought to my attention with the community fridges in the community. I expressed some concerns from a liability standpoint at that point with respect to the city's role in this. But as Chris said, you know, this is well-intentioned. The question isn't whether it's good or bad. Clearly, getting food to those who need it is good. The question from my perspective was whether it's permitted under the law and is there a liability risk for the city. So there are three things that play here. One is the city code provision that you're familiar with in section 223-26 that talks about property maintenance and talks about that you can't have certain things in the front yard. And the council adopted this law after a lot of discussion and public hearing on a number of different topics, and it was really an aesthetics issue about appliances in the front yard, and that was called out. We even had discussions about whether gardens should be allowed in the front yard. It was a rather robust discussion at the time. And so we've reviewed the code, the building inspector has as well, and having these community fridges would violate that section of the law. There's also the code provision 171-1 that talks about refrigerators and doors needing to be removed, that you can't have unattended fridges, and the community fridge would qualify as an unattended fridge. And even though the genesis of that law has been sort of addressed in some respects through changes to how those doors are attached and not being self-closing, etc., There still is that concern of unattended fridges. The underwriter's laboratory has the requirement of that door should be removed from fridges when they're being placed out for disposal. And so that concern still exists, and more importantly, it is a city code provision. The other thing is those two provisions are not unique to Beacon. They're fairly common and standard code provisions. The other concern we've expressed to Chris, and again, it wasn't just this past month, it was in the beginning of the year, certainly in the winter when I first discussed this topic with Chris, was the concern about liability for having this fridge on city property and the role of the city involved with it, and the city having the responsibility to make sure that the food that is being provided is safe to be used and that there's only food in there. And federal law, there's a federal law called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, Good Samaritan Food Act, and that provides for a safe harbor, a liability exemption for those who donate or distribute the food, but it's geared towards nonprofits. There's a gray area as to whether that applies to municipalities. It really is geared towards those who are donating the food and the nonprofits who are distributing it, and it is specific as a nonprofit. It doesn't define it to include a municipality. But I went under the assumption that it could because you're serving that same purpose, and you're considered exempt unless you would have liability if there's gross negligence or intentional misconduct. And gross negligence would be not monitoring it, allowing food in there that doesn't comport with the act or health department guidelines, and there has been evidence of that. So we were concerned that that created liability for the city in that respect. And I would again say it's not unique just to the city. There is a report that was done by Harvard Law School and Hofstra Law School that asks the question, are the models of city or local government offering support for the fridges? And the introductory paragraph says, currently there are few models that exist outlining strategies for city or local government funding or support for community fridges. In general, government response to community fridge operations range from non-involvement to penalties for violation of local laws, such as having no permit, creating a public nuisance, such as obstructing a sidewalk, or violating other health and zoning codes. And that was the concern that our office had in discussion with the building inspector, and it's not unique, and I'll leave it at that. So we have those legal questions, but as Chris mentioned, what I think the council needs to look at is not how to get it done, but are there ways to get the food to the people, and what is the model for that? And I think that's where Mark and his group come in, and certainly Dutchess County and others and the state provide those supports. So the question is, for the local government, is how would we go about providing that support? Because the question isn't whether the government has a role. It has, but the city has always provided support for that. And it's not about the intent here. Clearly there's a good intent. It's how do we go about providing that in a way that protects the city and gets those services to those who need it in a way that we all would think is appropriate. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
And Ben, can you put up the presentation that Mark had, please?
So, yeah, we're going to sit here tonight. We wanted to talk to you guys or share with you guys, you know, about a 5-year history with pantries and refrigerators at the rec center. Since taking over the rec center in 2014, we've had some type of support of the community as it relates to food. You know, we inherited a pantry in our gymnasium in 2014, which in some way, shape, or form has occurred over the years since then. You know, I wanted to touch on sort of 3 topics tonight, which is, you know, sort of current support to food initiatives, our observations of the refrigerator at the rec center over the last 5 years. I believe the model doesn't work, you know, and we have examples of that, and finally maybe some suggestions or thoughts moving forward. You know, currently food security initiatives are supported by the city and have, you know, like I said earlier, the pantry at the rec center sort of predates us using the building in some way. You know, the Fairground organization, you know, they have a once monthly distribution at our Memorial Park. You know, we've hosted that fridge at the rec center over the years, and we'll help with outreach and you know, after their distributions. You know, a lot of what we do in general, in support is legwork. Each of the sort of examples I'll bring up is, we take care of the garbage, we take care of recycling, we, run pallets around. A lot of that is how we can support it. It's space to do things, the fairground pantry once a month at the Memorial Park, the Beacon Mutual Aid, distribution twice monthly at the Rec Center and Memorial Park, which came out of the COVID times. That was something for close to 2.5 years. I personally volunteered on Wednesdays or eventually on city time to bring city resources to those distributions. And at one point we, received a grant from Community Block for food security and spent $25,000 on supplies that were distributed at these distributions or with other agencies. There's a shed at Memorial Park that we bought and placed for Mutual Aid's food distribution, so they had space to keep supplies and a pallet jack and stuff like that. Again, like I said, recycling and garbage we facilitate with our transfer station. One of the trucks in my little fleet parks at the rec center. The back of it is used for anyone that's doing distributions or food work at the rec center. They just pack their garbage and recycling into it. We run it down to the transfer station 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the organization that's doing stuff. Common Ground Farm does a backpack program in the schools. They have the storage closet in our gym where they house all the food for the backpacks. They come twice a week to pack backpacks, and they distribute. The volunteers come to the rec center and pick up backpacks and distribute stuff. Again, recycling and garbage, we facilitate that. They don't have to worry about that when they're done with their work. The current pantry at the rec center that happens on Saturdays is hosted by the Open Arms Ministry. And they set up every Saturday. They have, like I said, since, we took over the center in 2014 and do a food distribution right out of the rec center, and we have facilitate with outreach and flyers are on all the bulletin boards, and, we help with their garbage and recycling. So, Green Team, one of our tenants, Cornell Cooperative Extension Program, has a free, produce market every summer on Wednesday nights or Thursday nights. They have a mobile refrigeration unit that, I move around for them. When in season, we park it in a good spot. It's, plugged in and, runs off the city power for the summer months. And they use it to house, donations from the local farms and do their free farm stand once a week for the summer months. Again, sort of support of that initiative is, built in. It's a lot of sweat equity in a lot of ways. Really there's a lot we do, and those are just, sort of solid, if I'm sit down and rattle off examples, that's the sort of the heavy lifting in relation to sort of food security initiatives that we support, and have over the years. Sort of, the fridge, was, the idea came out of COVID at the rec center. Initially, we had hosted one of the tiny pantries from Fairground, and then, as sort of the need was identified or the idea, hatched, we took on, we said, okay, we'll try. I, right from the get-go, had concerns, in relation to its operation and how it was going to work, but we went ahead with it regardless. And over time, it's struggled. I believe there is a need for it. I believe there's, it was used. We observed that over the last 5 years. It's definitely used by who, I'm not sure, but, most of the community in some way, shape, or form are using it. Heidi will speak to sort of observations over the 5 years. That's not to say it wasn't useful. It's not to say it couldn't be, but, we found ourselves, struggling often, with some very basic things, the amount of food in the fridge, the cleanliness of the fridge, the other stuff that happens, with it being there, which, a lot of ways, if it was just people in need and volunteers filling it, it would be great, but it sits in a public space. There's people, there's vandalism. There's people that drop stuff off, ever drive by one of those clothing drops, and it, you're like, oh, that's where you can donate clothes, but it looks like a yard sale because people put tables and bags of stuff and old stuff. It really, that's what ended up happening sometimes too, is people, I think, meant well, but they would drop off household items and unsafe items and just random stuff, sort of requires constant sort of supervision, constant maintenance. But I'll let Heidi kind of pick it up from here and show us some stuff over the years.
Hi. Yeah, we're not here tonight to criticize any organization or volunteer or community member that helps with these services. We're just here to differentiate between the initial vision that people had and then the reality that actually exists, that we see each day when we come in. And we have become very protective over it and checking it because we understand that it's a valuable resource for people. But we also don't know how many people are actually using it, are there people we're not getting to, because there's no vetting process. It's just there and people are free to use it. So it's hard to tell. There could be a lot of people that are not receiving things that they need because it's anonymous, which it does have its benefits. And I have so many pictures because each picture that I took was a communication with an organization to say, hey, we have an issue today. And that's why I have so many pictures over the years, because it was a constant chain of communication with the organization to say, it's empty, it's a mess, it's in need of services. And a lot of times they would post on their Facebook page and call volunteers out, but it would be us that found it that way because the lack of consistent maintenance and cleaning and just checking of it. So just speaking to the model being broken, it was never a reliable source for people to provide meals in any way because it's all random donations. It's whatever was sent from the food banks for the distributions. It's what people have in their houses as leftovers, half-eaten sandwiches people would put in. They just think, I'm not going to finish it. Somebody else, if they need it, it's good enough, I guess. And it's, there's not a lot of dignity in looking in a fridge and finding somebody's half-eaten slice of pizza for people that are looking for food. So it kind of became a catch-all for redirecting food that was going to go to waste, and that's where a lot of the food comes from that is given out at the distributions. It's already almost expired a lot of times. Some of it's already expired when it goes in there, and it's packed full, so now there's no room for things that are viable because it's full of expired items. But without that day-to-day cleaning or just coming and putting eyes on it, it's now full, so do we move it out? Do we take it out? So there's definitely, it felt like more charity than an exchange of community members helping each other, which I think is how it initially had started. As far as food safety, the temperature, there's supposed to be thermometers. You're supposed to check temperatures of foods after they cool and how long are they sitting on counters. There's homemade things in there without labels or ingredients, so anybody with an allergy is now at risk for eating something that potentially could cause them a severe allergic reaction. There's pictures there of milk products, cheese, and sour cream that was just left in the hot pantry in the summer. It wasn't in the refrigerator. I don't even think we had a refrigerator at that time, but people left it just on the shelf, so potentially making somebody very sick. And you can see there's, the pie. It's just a shame when we see the people, because we've become close with all the community members that use it. And they say hi to us, and they're great people. And to know that that's what they're looking at it's very upsetting to us.
Well, and just the example of the pie is, we're not, something like that could have shown up intact, sealed, refrigerated, but 10 o'clock at night, somebody might have wandered by and been like, well, take a bite of pie, take a few bites out of it, put it back in the fridge. Again, that oversight or that sort of 24-hour access really changed, kind of how it would be used. A lot of times, Heidi made mention to sort of the food bank distribution or stuff that was coming, via distribution would be in excess, stocked into the pantry. So there are things that would, be, already distributed through people in need, and the excess would end up in the fridges and then just sit there, because maybe everyone already had 3 or 4 gallons of milk or something like that. And then again, there was sort of a wave to things. Fridge looks great, eventually it doesn't look great, and rally of arms and fridge looks great again, and it's a constant wave, of looking good and not so good, and the in-between is the difficult part, because it's, again, the food safety, all those concerns that sort of, kind of come up, will happen on a cycle there. So, if it's great for 2 days, it's, awful for, 5 or 6 days, and the cycle begins again. So, that's just a comment.
Ben, you can go to the next slide. Lots of non-food items that, they'd be alongside all of the food items that were in there. Used bedside urinals, things like that, that just should not be in a food pantry. Prescription medication that somebody decided to donate and put in Ziploc bags and hand label it. And one of them is actually an anti-seizure medication with a very heavy FDA warning not to drive or operate machinery if you take it. And that was just in there in a Ziploc bag with a handwritten piece of tape label on it. So anybody could have taken that and driven a car or done any, kids had access to it. It was just sitting in there.
And then not the pantry's fault, not the organization's fault, just the nature of, an open, accessible, sort of area, the pantry itself. And again, I think people meant well, dropping stuff off that were useful or somewhat useful, but it, again, has no place in a food pantry.
Yeah. And we do, obviously we take things out when we see it like that, but it's constant. It's just constant. You can go to the next slide, Dan. Just more examples of the same. The bottle of coconut aminos was donated in 2020. It expired in 2018. A tattoo machine with needles and ink, just donated. You can go to the next one. Vandalism, pretty often, especially when it was overstocked with a lot of the same things. We had so many pounds of apples at one point, and kids, of course, at some point came along and decided they were just going to smash the apples against the building and the shed and the vehicles and the sidewalk. And it's a waste of food also when the food's out there, regardless if somebody's going to take it or not. It's now all over the parking lot. It needs to be. You have to take care of that right away, because we do have people using our building on a daily basis, so we can't walk past it. It's on our way in the door in the morning, and that's what we find, and that has to be taken care of first. You can go to the next slide.
And that's just from our security cameras, video footage of somebody in the evening, just grabbed a bag of apples out of the pantry and, just started blasting them against the pantry.
They were throwing them at the lights in the parking lot. That I'm sure are pretty expensive. Yeah, you can go to the next one. Just more of the same. Used underwear next to food. But yeah, it does require daily, at a minimum, oversight and cleaning. And I get it's tough with volunteers because you're, asking people to be on call all the time, which is why we're expressing that model doesn't quite work in an area like this, because I don't know what organization has volunteers on call 24/7 to go handle things like this.
And over this 5 years, several organizations, lots of volunteers, the rec department, my staff, all sort of taking care or trying to take care of this, and this is sort of the same outcomes, you know what I mean? You know, unless we can figure out a model that works, this one doesn't, you know?
And most people that utilize it, they just assume that the city owns it and that the recreation department manages it. That's just their assumption because of where it is. And they have knocked on the door at different times, just, you know, thinking it must be ours because it's right there. So there is that also where even if they did have an issue and they wanted to speak to somebody from the organization, they don't always know who to get in touch with. And we're happy to direct them, but when you're looking at it, there is the assumption that it does belong to the city. You can go to the next one, Ben. Yeah, and then as far as the items that are in there, it's basically stocked with what the organizations have, not necessarily what people might need. So it's there for people to take, but we don't really know without reaching out and speaking to these people what they actually do need. A lot of times it was limited nutritionally, the things that were in there, because again, it would be just one item, all the same thing. So if we're trying to actually feed people, we would need to have more of a model, like I was speaking to somebody, I was saying like WIC, where you get a set, you know, same food every month. You get cereal and milk and canned, you know, whatever the case is, juice. This is kind of just what's available at the time, and it may not meet the dietary needs or the preferences of people in the community, but, you know, you don't want it to feel like, well, they're hungry enough, so it's fine. I think there could be more communication with the community, even finding out what the need is, and even directing them towards agencies that they may not know even exist for the needs that they have. But it did become a catch-all for pretty much anything and everything, as you can see. And I think that is probably...
And just one sort of comment to kind of close this out. We have observed over the 5 years, you know, people walk up and use the pantry, people drive up and use the pantry, people use it in the morning, evening. You know, I do not think, you know, I don't think it's not utilized. You know, it's definitely utilized. You know, a few people, yeah, every once in a while you ask, you know, how they're doing or what's going on, you know, and just conversations never related to food and stuff, and you know, just a good cross-section of Beacon. You know, was there a need? I'm not sure. You know, we've watched, you know, I've watched it be stocked, clean, stocked, looking fantastic. Within 10 minutes, a car pull in and somebody cleaned the entire fridge out. And I hope they're distributing it throughout other people. I have no idea. More than one occasion I've watched, literally minutes after the fridge being stocked, somebody pull in and empty it, you know, not take a few things, you know, like bags, you know, and again, you know, I kind of walk away from that hoping they're, you know, definitely need it, or they're going to distribute it to other people, or who knows, you know, and never one of those things that you wanted to ask somebody, like, why did you take everything in the fridge, you know? Again, we don't really have any data to know, but, you know, it there is, you know, used, you know, for sure, like everything else, you know, the grocery distributions and the Saturday distribution, and, you know, the Green Team produce market is all, again, you know, sort of free and open, you know, nobody asks, you know, there's no criteria to be qualified or anything. It's, if you want vegetables, you come get them type thing. But, you know, again, active, but, you know, again, you know, I don't know necessarily if we're serving a need or just distributing food that, you know, needs to be distributed.
And I think that's where it got lost in translation a little bit, was, like you were saying, during, you know, COVID, when it was a necessary resource. But then having a fridge just full of grapes, like when you have, and nothing else can fit in there, that's what's going to sit in there for the next week, because you're not going to possibly give away all those grapes to the same, you know, people that come daily to check the fridge. So now you're preventing any other food being put in there because it's, well, the same thing. And different people putting different things in there, so it's not, there's no oversight as to who's putting stuff in and when they're putting it in. And people never, like the people that use it don't complain. They never look at us when we're outside and say, this is, you know, this is terrible, there's only grapes in here. Like they're happy with what's in there. And we, as far as like us helping with it, that wasn't really the issue either. It could be better. It could be, you know, it could be done much better, I believe.
Comments? Questions?
Lee, if I could, I just wanted to also note that Nick and I did reach out to regulatory agencies, including Dutchess County Health Department, who then, on our behalf, reached out to the state. The proliferation of these during COVID has far outstripped the capacity to regulate them. And that was stressed to us by the county. They didn't want to put anything official in writing, but they did say, look, if you were a restaurant or a food truck or even a booth at the county fair, you'd have regulations on how you prepare food and store it, distribute it, and then where it ends up. All of this is falling below that. And just because it's not regulated doesn't mean that it should have any less protection for food safety purposes, because these are actually the most vulnerable households in our city. They can least afford to get sick and miss a day of work or of school. And so again, I think it's not that people didn't really try and really come to this with the best intentions. It's the design of this model isn't controlled enough to ensure food safety. The other thing I think that we have to consider is the opportunity cost. All of the time that our staff put into cleaning this, we'd like to use instead to figure out other systems that might deliver the same or better services more efficiently with less unintended consequences. Heidi mentioned one thing, which was like the food carts that WIC did, and it's not something that we're ready to do, but it's something that we're ready to look at and consider and think of other options. It's not necessarily efficient to give people food that they don't know how to cook or they didn't need. And really, if you want to establish dignity and you're saying there's this hole in our food system, people can't make the regular things they need, fresh food, they need perishable food, I really think our team can come up with other options working with some of the local partners that isn't a fridge, you know, that basically says, why don't we let people buy the food that they actually need and figure out how to do that, maybe where they get discounts or we hook them up with other organizations. So again, I think our issue isn't with any particular organization, it's with this model. And there's only 3 of these in the county. 2 of them were in Beacon, and those are gone. And the other one is in Fishkill, and it's at the Fishkill pantry, so somebody's really keeping an eye on it. The other things that we've offered, if the hours of distributions aren't good, we're open and working with other organizations to do them in the evening, or to do them early in the morning, or to figure out maybe on a weekend we do an extra one. We're also willing to make inroads to other entities. I mean, again, we talked about having a housing task force because the different entities aren't talking. I also think that's not happening with food, because there's a pantry at St. Andrews. There's a program over at the Friendship Center at Beacon Housing Authority. I think the city can play a coordinating role in that and trying to figure out where the gaps are. The other thing is something that Jeff talks about a lot, is data. We didn't have any hard data from 5 years of operation. We don't know how many people use it. We don't know how many people came and looked at the fridge once and walked away. And what's been said to me is one of the things that's good about this is the anonymity, but it really leaves a lot of risks. And the other thing is, I think we need to move away from anonymity towards community, where we get to know people and then we can hook them into other supports that we've developed. I mean, we're really turning the recreation department towards some innovative stuff like the youth employment, and we may have other things that we can help families with other than just food. If we know that they're having childcare issues, maybe we can get them into our after-school programs or our summer camp and things like that. So again, I think our point today was to say, look, this was a really small part of our food system. We continue to support a robust food system, and we'll continue to talk about other options for expanding that. But to just double down on the fridges after what we've been through is really not wise, and it's really not fair to the people that are using this. No one can argue that, somebody who goes and sees one thing one week and another thing, that's efficient use of their time. Why don't we give them a card and let them go buy the products that they need so that they don't have to, it's like it's like your kid needs a size 6 sneaker and he goes to a clothing distribution and all they have is size 10 boots. Imagine how frustrating that is. My mother would have gone to that once and seen 50 pounds of rancid tofu and never come back. I think we can design a better system, but we needed to show the reality of what this fridge system has been. And our conclusion is we don't want it back, and we want to find more thoughtful, efficient, effective interventions that don't have the risks, the liability, and the food safety concerns. Maybe we shouldn't be touching food at all and figure out a better model of that. And again, I think I have a really good team here that's absolutely committed. I would say give us some time to work on it, and we'll have them hammer out some alternatives to come back with you.
I think just talking about it, also, it can decrease the stigma that's associated with people asking for help when they need it. We all fall on hard times, and I used to get my kids Christmas gifts at the pantry in Hopewell Junction, and some years I was able to donate money for families that, to purchase gifts for them. So I don't think it's a bad thing when we ask each other for help, and I think if we're having open conversations, that maybe the reason for the anonymity, maybe we can, lessen that a little bit by saying it's fine, we can all just help each other. And I think that's what the initial goal behind mutual aid is community members helping each other. Going back to trade for, trading goods for services, and it's, things like that are okay. And we don't judge anybody that comes to the rec center when we have things there. We don't go out there and judge them, and there's nobody in the community that comes over and judges them either. So, and everybody's very open when they come there anyway, because we're in the middle of the parking lot, and there's people through that parking lot all day long, and the people that are using the resources that we've seen are waving at us and telling us when their birthday is and things like that. So they're family to us. We are at work more than we're home with our own families. So we do care about the people that need the services.
Yeah. I think in kind of what I've seen in other, states or municipalities that do have the community fridges is that they are often encouraged to be on private property, but it sounds like we couldn't even offer that as a viable option if, say, the church was willing to put a refrigerator out. Our code prohibits that.
You could put them in a shed.
I was going to say, right, if it's inside or somehow
Okay.
contained, if it's not unattended, if it's not in a front yard, I think there are ways that it could be done.
Do we need to make modifications,
I don't
or do we need to clarify for people that that's permitted?
No. The building department gave me a pretty unequivocal ruling that if you had a shed and you put this in, they don't see an issue with it. They don't see that we have any regulatory role at all. If you had it inside, for instance, St. Andrew's Church has refrigeration down below, and we actually left an opening in the new parking lot at the firehouse so that people could access it. If you had it inside, you'd have no issue at all. I mean, the issue with having them outside is only really that a lot of these refrigerators really aren't designed to put up with that. The compressors
They're indoor refrigerators.
I mean, again, I think people could do these on private property if they're indoors. But again, I think people should think about the food safety issues there. Inviting people to make things where you don't know the ingredients, or you don't know the source or the date, or
Yeah, I mean, other regulations that I see require labeling, and, I think that there are ways for private, if the desire is that these be permitted on private property, which I'm perfectly fine with, I think it's up to the organization and the property owner to make sure that, food is labeled, that it's not expired, and
we'd have no issue with it, Amber. But we also want to think out other things, because we do know people are coming to the rec department, and
Yeah, I
think-
totally agree with that. I certainly think that we should have a place in helping the community. Food insecurity is not something that's going away. It's probably getting worse. I think that we should do everything that we can to make sure that we have programs in place and that we're connecting people to those programs appropriately. I think in terms of this question, the organization seems, I haven't actually spoken to anybody directly, so I'll just say it sounds to me as if they would like to continue the program, and I'm just kind of trying to understand if there are some ways to do that. And it sounds like there are. On private property, we wouldn't have a problem if it's located in a shed. Does the shed have to have doors? Can it be 3 sides?
would have to be enclosed, fully enclosed.
Okay.
And that's how the one in New Paltz is designed.
Yeah, but
So it's not, you can make them look nice. The other issue I would just highlight is the pantry should be secure. We had issues with squirrels and mice, and, again, I think if somebody was willing to do it on private property, they could manage it in a way that we're unable to. The ask wasn't to do it on private property. The ask back to us was to go back and do another fridge and the city take care of it at the city's cost. If we're going to get into the food business, I want to have at least a thoughtful analysis and evaluation of what our alternatives are.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure that if the city doesn't have a legal concern with it on being a private lot, that it solves the problems that were raised, because if it's unsupervised, you're still going to have I think the same issues that, you all describe. Now, if a private person, wants to actually, work it with regularity, I think that would help. But even if it's unsupervised for a few minutes, a restaurant with an unsupervised fridge in the back wouldn't pass a health inspection. It just wouldn't, ever, right? Not unless there's somebody there at all times. So I don't know if I know it may be okay, but I don't think that solves the problem in terms of it's not a good model, and we ought to think about other approaches that might be better.
I would just say if the organization and the person hosting the fridge believe it's a good model, then by all means, please go ahead with it. If the city doesn't believe that it's the best model for it to host at a city site, and there are other things that we would prefer to do, also fine.
The only role the city would have is if it receives complaints from a neighborhood about property maintenance, or about it's a nuisance or anything of that nature, then the city would have an enforcement role in that respect with a fridge or pantry on private property.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Amber in that if, I believe that the organizations that have run these or running these currently do see there is a need for them. I'm not a food expert, sort of access to food insecurity, or to address food insecurity, so I would trust that there is a need for them. The exact model that would work, I would also leave up to the entities. If there are things, the liability issues that the city is aware of that come up, if there are ways that we can address them, that I would just want to look into that. If it is, that we say, work with the entity they do have to have hours that aren't 24 hours. There needs to be someone who's responsible. I don't know if that actually is a need. I'm not sure how the one in New Paltz works, but just kind of looking at what actually is workable. Just kind of make sure that if there's, I just trust that there is a need out there for them. That's why there is the desire to bring them back in the city of Beacon in the quickest way possible. And so I think kind of looking what the city can do to help support that within our boundaries.
I think if somebody wanted to establish it privately, we wouldn't be involved, Molly.
Right.
And I really think there's other models here, like figure out how to buy food carts so somebody can actually just go and buy the food that they want. I think we've confused the genuinely important effort of reducing food waste with helping poor people. The way this is being managed in a lot of ways is we're kind of, the cast-off food is going to the poorest families. Not what they need nutritionally, not what they'd eat, not what's culturally appropriate, but what's left over in lots of quantities. Mark told me one day he had a whole truckload of milk that just had to go in the garbage because we just had too much of it. I don't know that, I think you have to think about whether your primary mission is eliminating food waste or serving poor people, because I don't know that they're always in tandem. I get the whole gleaning movement and trying not to waste produce, but like when you stuff 100 pounds of onion into the fridge, you're really not helping anybody. And why not just give them, I mean, they have more leeway to do this than we do. Fundraise, give out cards. We try to figure out how much value comes out of the refrigerator at the recreation center. To be honest, Mark thought it was under $100 a week of real value. Let's say it's double that, $200. For $10,000 a year, you could basically give food cards, and then people could buy things that maybe you're not ever getting, like spices and oils and certain meats and things that are certain cultural groups do eat that don't end up in these fridges. So please, before we just roll back into this, we ended this because this was a public health threat. Take a moment and think about this, and think about the other things that we could do that actually would save your volunteers time and not bring any of these other negative things into play.
I appreciate that thinking about what we can do in the future, and so I think thinking about the Nutrition Advisory Committee, I like the idea of that, and if there are models out there that we can support or enhance, or way we can use city resources that would be appropriate for addressing the needs, as Amber pointed out, that things are likely to get worse before they get better, and so ways that we as a city, I think it's a value that a lot of us hold in the city of Beacon, and so I think it's something to kind of, if there are ways that the city can play a role in addressing it, knowing that we are not food safety experts, that we do rely on partnerships with nonprofits like the ones who've been running the community fridges to really kind of identify the things that might work, and so the ways that the city can do to work with them is great.
I think a lot of our frustration with the whole situation was that we do want people to get what they need. And what we saw in real life that really was not happening. It looks nice as like a thought or a vision, but in real practice, we saw a lot of waste. We saw a lot of, conditions that, people were not being, they couldn't go with dignity and get a meal and go home and cook it for their family. And I think that's where we supported it for as long as we did, because we knew there was some merit to parts of it. But it just wasn't working fully. But that in no way means that we want to be the ones to block people getting what they need. We want that to happen.
Understood.
Okay. Enough for
Thank you, Mark and Heidi.
Yeah, thanks all. That was a really good conversation.
Yeah. All right. If it's all right, I'll just do a couple announcements and we're done. Is that all right? So tomorrow, the planning board is going to be meeting at 7. That's their usual time. And we're invited to join them to have a discussion between council and planning board. It will be informal, and we're just talking about, issues they may see that we may want to hear or have a perspective or do something about, or vice versa. And so again, it's not a formal meeting, but it will be public because it's the start of their meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And it shouldn't last an hour. Right, so it's at 7 here tomorrow. And then the next meeting for the council is next Monday at 7 here. And are we good?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Motion?
Second.
So Molly and Pam, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all.